Hey guys, tonight we wander deep into the echo of war drums and bronze-forged dreams. You're standing under a sky thick with the smell of fire and human ambition. And ahead of you, the battlefield stirs like an angry sea. Your body shakes not with fear, exactly, but with the uncomfortable realization that your armor is, well, mostly wishful thinking. It's bronze. Shiny. Yes. Impressive from a distance. Maybe. But you already know it's not going to stop much. A sword. Maybe. An arrow. Probably not. A big rock. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Where are you watching from? What's your local time now? Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You adjust the stiff metal plate strapped to your chest at creaks, not in reassurance, but in protest. The early days of armor were all about ideas, not necessarily execution. Picture yourself in the Eastern Mediterranean, somewhere between 1600 and 1000 BCE. You're either a Mycenaean warrior, all swagger and decorative tassels, or maybe a Hittite foot soldier with a half-decent spear and dreams of not getting skewered today. Either way, you're wearing bronze. The thing about bronze is it's soft. Softer than iron. Anyway, it dented. It cracked. And in a prolonged fight, it bent in ways your ribcage didn't appreciate. But that didn't stop ancient civilizations from using it. Because it was the best they had. It could be cast into rounded cuirasses or hammered into sheets for greaves and vambraces. And bonus, it was shiny. Warriors glinted in the sun, which probably helped morale, or blinded the enemy, or just made you easier to shoot. Historians still argue whether the bronze was meant to intimidate or impress. But either way, vanity had a role. Now, don't forget your helmet. Early designs weren't exactly ergonomic. You had the Kegel helmet, basically a bronze cone for your head, with maybe a nasal guard if your commander liked you. Or the Corinthian helmet, glorious in sculpture. Suffocating in practice. Limited vision, check. Echo chamber acoustics, double check. One historian quipped it was more like wearing a bell than a hat, and you wore it all day. Underneath it all, leather, thick, padded leather tunics to stop the metal from eating your skin. You'd sweat buckets inside. And if your commanding officer gave you a full bronze panoply helmet, breastplate, greaves you could barely move, especially if you were a charioteer. Yes, people fought in chariots wearing solid bronze. Mobility was a suggestion. Hydration was a myth. And don't forget the status factor. In early Rome and Etruria, bronze armor was a symbol of wealth and standing. The poor, they got luck. Maybe a small round shield and prayers to Mars. In fact, some scholars believe that early Roman military organization, those fancy classes, was built around who could afford better armor. The more bronze you could strap to yourself, the higher you stood in the ranks. Not that this guaranteed survival. Just prächtiger. Now, here's your quirky fact of the night. Some early bronze helmets were designed with elaborate animal crests. Lions. Bulls. Even birds. Were they magical, protective, cool-looking? Maybe all three? But imagine ducking under a sword swing while a brass swan is glued to your skull. That's confidence. Of course. There was a flaw in all this glorious, metallic fashion. Bronze is expensive. And heavy. And did I mention soft, as ironworking emerged? Bronze began to feel outdated, like showing up to a gunfight with a gold-plated slingshot. Eventually, people realized that steel not only held its edge better, but also allowed for more complex shaping. But in these early centuries, before legions and longswords, before chainmail and Gothic plate, bronze was the dream. You trudge through the dust of a long-forgotten battlefield. Around you, fragments of old bronze plates lie half-buried green with corrosion, etched with forgotten emblems. Maybe someone once believed this would protect them. Maybe it did. But more likely, they fell just like you might have, with metal clanking, breath heaving, and the distant sound of war trumpets blurring into silence. And yet, there's something noble in that beginning. In the raw effort to shield a fragile human body with gleaming metal, shaped by calloused hands and the fire of primitive forges, it's armor, not just for the skin, but for the spirit. An early declaration. I refuse to be easy prey. So, here you are. Gleaming, gasping, and quite possibly doomed, but brave. Because bronze didn't save everyone. It didn't even save most. But it meant someone had tried. Someone had dared to forge a future where defense was more than just a desperate dodge. And that future, well, it's only just beginning to take shape. The sun hangs lower now, casting long shadows on your polished chest plate. Well, sculpted the chest plate. To be exact, you glance down and realize this thing has abs. You didn't earn those abs. Of course. But the armor gods bestowed them upon you anyway. Welcome to the era of the muscle cuirass. The proud, chest-thumping fashion of elite warriors who wanted their opponents to know, yes, I lift, even if they didn't. You're standing in the heart of classical Rome. Perhaps in the 5th or 4th century BCE. You shift your shoulders. The armor clings tight, molded from bronze or occasionally iron, shaped to resemble an idealized male torso-chiseled pecs, tapered waist, maybe even a few ribs. And that's not vanity talking well. Okay. It is a little bow. It was meant to convey divine strength. You weren't just a man in armor. You were a sculpture that hit back. Historians still argue whether muscle cuirasses were standard issue for generals or reserved purely for parades and high-ranking officers. What they agree on, though, is that these beauties were equal parts protection and performance. The armor was meant to inspire loyalty in troops, awe in civilians, and hesitation in enemies. Because nothing says unapproachable god of war like bronze pecs that never sag. Now, putting it on, not easy. The cuirass came in 2 pieces, front and back, strapped or hinged together at the shoulders and sides. Underneath, you wore a linen tunic and maybe some leather padding if you were lucky. And remember, this thing was metal. On a hot day, it baked you like a dinner roll. On a cold day, instant ice bath. You were basically a walking climate hazard. There's a quiet comedy to it all. Imagine a Roman general dramatically mounting his horse, chest gleaming in the sun, looking 10 times buffer than he actually was, and underneath, he's scratching like mad because the bronze edges are digging into his armpits. Military glamour. Ancien edition, your helmet, meanwhile, likely sported a high crest sometimes made of horsehair. Dyed, red or black. Standing tall, like an overconfident rooster. And your legs protected by bronze greaves. Clamped onto your shins with straps or inner linings, these also followed the muscle motif. Curving to match the contours of a heroic leg, they didn't always fit heroic legs. Mind you, but that's what hammering was for. But there was a deeper meaning behind the style. Greek and Roman thinkers saw the human body, particularly the male body, as a symbol of harmony, balance, and cosmic order. To cast that body into bronze and wear it into battle, that was claiming alignment with the divine. You weren't just defending your city. You were the city. Walking, fighting, gleaming proof of its ideals. Still, there were flaws. The muscle cuirass didn't flex, bent, or breathe. Once you were in it, you were committed. Mobility suffered. So did stealth. And if you were unlucky enough to take a blow right where two plates met, say, near the armpit or lower ribs, it was curtains. Not that anyone wanted to talk about that part. Much cooler to talk about the one time Marcus Pompilius allegedly deflected a javelin with nothing but his peck-shaped armor and a witty retort. And here's tonight's quirky gem. Some muscle cuirasses were painted to emphasize the details. Yes, like comic book shading, deeper shadows on the abs, rosier tints on the nipples. Historians found traces of red pigment on recovered specimens and had to confront a bizarre truth. Some Roman officers wanted to look like bronzed beach hunks. Or bronzed god hunks. If we're being generous, even emperors got in on the trend. Augustus famously posed in a muscle cuirass for statues. Most notably, the Prima Porta Augustus. It wasn't just armor, it was propaganda. The sculpted torso wasn't his real body, it was his public body. A body above question, sculpted by the state and frozen in eternal youth. But by the later Roman period, practical concerns started to outweigh aesthetic ones. Chainmail was making a comeback. Segmentata was gaining ground. The muscle cuirass began to retreat to ceremonial use trophies for generals. Costumes for marble statues. Armor for guns, but no longer for guns. Still, you admire it. As you stand before a mirror, a polished bronze shield propped nearby, you flex inside the chest plate. It doesn't budge. Of course it doesn't. But the illusion holds, for a moment, you're not a weary soldier. You're a titan. A living sculpture. An icon of power frozen in gleaming bronze. Just maybe don't sneeze while wearing it. There's not a lot of give. And now, your sweat itches. Your shoulders bruising. And your thighs are begging for freedom. But you know something's changing. Armor is beginning to walk the tightrope between intimidation and innovation. Beauty and brutality. Art and war. The kind of balance only history can choreograph, and you're right at its muscular, metallic heart. You're not feeling so divine anymore. The bronze muscle cuirass looked spectacular. Sure, but the chafing, the weight, the strange pinching right where your ribs try to be ribs, you decide it's time to downshift. No guts. No pecs. Just you. A soldier. And the desperate need for something wearable. Welcome to the quiet revolution of armor, linen, and leather. You duck into a tent. Or maybe a shadowy corridor in a Roman outpost. And you see it hanging there. Nothing flashy. No sculpted abs. No shimmering metal. Just a thick tunic stitched from overlapping layers of linen or boiled leather. It smells like sweat and smoke and something that used to be an animal. And it's beautiful. This is body armor for the rest of us affordable, repairable, and shockingly effective. That thick linen, not your average toga. It's laminated linen, stacked in dozens of layers, glued and pressed until it forms a kind of ancient Kevlar. The Greeks called it the linothorax. And if made properly, it could deflect arrows, absorb sword strikes, and even survive a rainstorm without disintegrating, well, mostly. Historians still argue whether the glue used was organic paste or something resin-based. But whatever it was, it held strong at least until the fourth spear of the day. The leather option wasn't far behind. Rawhide, boiled into stiffness, shaped and hardened over wooden molds, then painted or lacquered for durability. You could reinforce it with bits of bronze or iron, especially over the chest or shoulders. If you were lucky, it looked like armor. If you weren't, it looked like a particularly stiff apron. Still, it worked. Sort of. Let's not pretend it was glamorous. Though, if you've ever worn wet leather in the heat, you know the smell. Soldiers who wore it all day. They stank, they squeaked, they left streaks of dye on everything they touched. And still, they were grateful. Because, unlike that rigid bronze shell, linen and leather gave you movement. You could crouch. You could run. You could throw a javelin without your torso locking up like a stuck drawer. You lean forward, tugging the armor tighter. It hugs your body. Not too tight. Not too loose. It breathes with you. In fact, some reconstructions have shown that linothorax-like armor could weigh less than 6 pounds while still offering real protection, less than a small backpack. And you could make one yourself. With patience, fabric, glue, and enough YouTube tutorials. Okay. Maybe not that last one. You could go from unarmored peasant to partially invincible peasant. Now, for your quirky trivia treat, some leather armor was actually embossed with decorative patterns, lions, eagles, even entire battle scenes. Imagine flexing your biceps and watching a miniature war unfold across your chest. One unearthed piece showed what might have been a love poem inked on the inside. Protection and poetry in the same breath. Because why not get stabbed with style? And yet, these materials weren't just a compromise for the poor. Officers wore them too, especially when traveling, marching, or fighting in humid regions where metal would rust faster than morale. In Egypt, some Roman units ditched iron entirely for heat-friendly gear. In the damp northern provinces, leather was waterproofed with oils or waxes and worn under cloaks. You weren't making a fashion statement. You were surviving. Of course, you couldn't rely on this armor forever. A lucky arrow to the ribs, a mace to the spine linen, didn't stop everything. But it gave you a chance. A fighting chance. And that meant more than all the bronze pecs in the Empire. Historians still argue about just how common these types of armor were. Written sources are vague. Art is inconsistent. Some say only Greek hoplites used linothoraxes. Others think Roman auxiliaries embraced it too. What's clear is this. When you're thousands of miles from home, deep in hostile territory, and your commander's budget is tighter than your belt, you take what you can get. Leather, linen, burlap, even animal hide sewn with bone plates if it buys you another sunrise. It's armor. So now, as you sit under a tree, sharpening your sword with a rock and your patience, you find yourself strangely content. This armor won't win any beauty contests, but it moves when you move. It bends when you bend. And most importantly, it lets you breathe. The wind picks up somewhere nearby. Someone's coughing. You adjust your leather straps and close your eyes for just a second. There's a quiet dignity in simplicity. In the folds of linen, stitched by calloused hands, in the soft creak of boiled hide hugging your ribs. Maybe you're not a bronze god. Maybe you never were. But tonight, you're wearing the kind of armor that says, I'm still here. And for now, that's enough. You wake before dawn. The air thick with anticipation and the scent of damp earth and iron. Today, you're not just a soldier. You're a cog in the grand machinery of Roman discipline, one segment among thousands. Each clad in the marvel of ancient military engineering, the lorica segmentata. You shrug it on slowly. The chest plate isn't a solid mass, but a collection of horizontal iron bands segmented like the shell of a beetle. They curl around your torso, overlapping for both flexibility and coverage. Two large shoulder plates hinge down and buckle over your chest. You look less like a man in armor and more like an armored centipede, which, admittedly, is a step up from linen pajamas. This isn't just armor, it's a statement. The lorica segmentata is Rome saying, we figured it out. Light enough for forced marches, strong enough for frontal assaults, and complicated enough that you can't possibly put it on without help. A few leather straps dangle where they shouldn't, and you silently curse Publius again for tightening your side buckle too hard yesterday. He's always had a flair for dramatics. Segmentata, meaning segmented armor, was reserved primarily for legionaries. The elite heavy infantry of the Roman Empire during the 1st to 3rd centuries CE. It was expensive, tricky to maintain, and incredibly effective when used by Rome's well-trained troops. It shimmered in the sunlight during marches and thundered like 1,000 steel drums in battle. Now here's a quirky fact for your morning stretch. Some surviving examples of the lorica segmentata were unearthed in near-perfect condition at places like Corbridge and Newstead. But for decades, scholars couldn't agree on how to assemble them. Historians, reenactors, and hobbyists spent years playing ancient IKEA with rusted fragments and guesswork. Even now, they're still not entirely sure whether all soldiers wore it the same way, or if every garrison had its own slightly wonky method of construction. Historians still argue whether the segmentata was a standardized masterpiece or a logistical nightmare. You tug at the straps and twist your torso experimentally. It moves with you, sort of. The design allows for more agility than a solid breastplate, but less than mail. Still, it shines with unmistakable Roman pride. And that's the point. In battle, visibility matters. Not just for fear, but for identity. When you saw those glinting bands moving in formation, you didn't think peasants, you thought legion. But don't get too cocky. While the lorica segmentata offers excellent protection against slashing attacks and projectiles, it has a few weak spots. Under the arms, for one, and at the lower torso, if you happen to get stabbed from below, which, unfortunately, happens more often than you'd like to think. Plus, it's a nightmare in muddy terrain. All those moving parts can jam, rust, or snap. Imagine trying to clean 40+ iron plates after a 3-day slog through rain. You're not just a soldier. You're a walking maintenance project. Still, Roman supply chains made it work. Armor wasn't always made individually. Some pieces were mass-produced and then custom, fitted by trimming or punching new holes. You might not have been issued your exact size, but you could modify it or trade with a friend. This modular approach gave the Romans a distinct edge. They could outfit large numbers of troops quickly and relatively efficiently, especially compared to tribes who relied on personal craftsmanship. Let's take a break to talk fashion. Because yes, even military armor has its little flourishes. Some segmentata suits were polished to a mirror-like finish. Others bore engraved markings from the workshops that produced them, or small stamps indicating inspections. You might even find graffiti little carvings of names, prayers, or, in one case, what appears to be a stick-figure goat. Soldiers get bored. Okay, under the armor. You wear a tunic, usually wool, and a subarmalis, a padded leather vest to cushion your shoulders and absorb some of the strain. Without it, your clavicles would hate you forever. And over it all, a belt. Always a belt, covered in dangling strips of leather or metal. These weren't just for holding your gear. They made you jingle, like a deadly wind chime. It was your uniform's punctuation. And what about the enemy? Oh, they noticed. Barbarian tribes often knew Roman armor by its distinct look and sound. The lorica segmentata became a symbol of order, of empire, of inevitability. To some, it was terrifying. To others, a target. You march on. The sun rises. Rows upon rows of your brothers in iron move with mechanical precision. A parade of segmented steel rippling across the valley. You are unified, identical, replaceable, but strong. The segmentata doesn't just protect your body, it absorbs your individuality. You become a Roman legionary. First and last. Of course. The glory wouldn't last forever. After the 3rd century, the segmentata faded. Too costly. Too complex. The empire shifted back to mail and simpler forms of protection. But for a few shining centuries, it was the gold standard of military fashion and function. You pause for breath. The armor clinks gently, humming with history. You can feel it pressing against your chest, not just metal, but memory of Rome's ambition, its discipline, its strange, beautiful obsession with order. You roll your shoulders, you squint toward the horizon, and then you march again. One plate overlapping the next, wrapped in the segmented soul of an empire. It's the sound that gets you first. Not a clash, or a crack, or a war cry, but a swish. Like wind through metal grass. You look to your left and see a soldier moving with an odd grace. His armor doesn't clank. It shimmers, flowing with his movements like water that bites. That's when you notice he's not wearing plates. He's wearing rings. Thousands of them. Linked. Interlocked. Forged into a draping coat of flexible defiance. This is mail armor. And tonight, it makes its mark. You walk closer and hear it again, that whispering rattle. Like chains rolling over silk. The Romans called it lorica hamata. And you can see why. Hamata means hooked. And each ring catches the next in a seamless dot. Hypnotic loop. It covers the torso. Shoulders. Sometimes the thighs. It glints with restrained menace. It doesn't need to show off. It just works. Historians still debate who invented mail, whether it was the Celts, Persians, or someone in between. But by the time Rome took notice in the 3rd century BCE, the Celts had already been using it to great effect. The Romans, ever the pragmatic magpies, copied it immediately and never looked back. For hundreds of years, hamata became the standard issue armor of legionaries, auxiliarii, and centurions alike. Now, here's your quirky bedtime nugget. A single Roman mail shirt could contain over 30 individual iron rings. 30,000. And yes, someone had to link every single one by hand. There were 2 main types. Riveted mail, which used tiny metal pins to secure each ring shut, and butted mail, where rings were simply pressed closed. Riveted was stronger, but costlier. Butted was faster, but, well, let's just say if someone stabbed you hard enough, your armor might come apart, like medieval confetti. You slip the mail over your shoulders. It's heavy, really heavy, like small dog curled around your torso heavy. Most mail shirts weighed between 10 to 15 kilograms, 22 to 33 pounds. And while the weight was evenly distributed, it didn't exactly scream comfort. You feel it dragging on your collarbones, tugging at your hips. And once it gets wet, double the misery. A drenched mail hauberk was like swimming in a coin purse. But you forgive it, because it's saving your life. Mail was absurdly good at stopping cuts and slashes. A sword strike would glance off or get caught in the rings. Arrows would often flatten against the mesh, especially when worn over a padded undergarment like the subarmalis or a gambeson. Thrusts were trickier. Of course, no armor is perfect. But even then, mail bought you a second. And in battle, a second is everything. You bend, twist, crouch. Mail moves with you. It's like second skin. If your skin were forged in 1,000 tiny fires and smelled vaguely of vinegar, unlike the rigid segmentata or the clunky cuirass, hamata lets you breathe. It doesn't shout. It hums. Of course. The maintenance, a nightmare. Rust was the eternal enemy. Roman soldiers carried little cloths and oil to polish their rings daily. And if a link broke, you had to replace it with pliers. Patience and prayers. Mail repair was a meditative act like knitting. If knitting could stop a spear, the armor spread far beyond Rome. The Sassanids wore it. The Byzantines refined it. Even later, medieval knights layered it under plate armor for joint protection. Mail was universal. It transcended cultures. It didn't care where you came from, just whether you wanted to live long enough to see dinner. There's something deeply human about it. Chainmail isn't flashy. It doesn't scream heroism. It's practical, durable, reliable. Like the people who wore it, you weren't a golden statue on a rearing horse. You were a foot soldier, knee-deep in mud, trying not to die. And for that, mail was your best friend. Historians still argue whether mail was too expensive for mass use or cleverly mass-produced through specialized workshops. What we do know is that mail pieces have been found across the empire from rainy Britannia to sun-baked Syria. Wherever there was danger, there were rings. You rest for a moment. The mail settles around you. Oddly comforting. like a weighted blanket made by a particularly stern blacksmith. You run your fingers across the tiny links and feel the stories held inside them of battles fought, wounds survived, comrades lost and buried, still wearing theirs. You stand. The mail shifts with you. No dramatic clink. No heroic gleam. Just that soft, metallic hush. You are protected not by the gods, not by divine abs, but by thousands of patient, stubborn circles, linked by hands that knew what it meant to be afraid and to prepare anyway. You wake sore, but alive. And today, something is different. You're not grabbing iron, not fussing with leather. You're reaching for a coat. Thick, quilted, stuffed to the seams with padding. It looks soft. It feels soft. You briefly wonder if it's just a really heavy bathrobe. But as you tug it on and feel the weight press evenly across your torso, arms, and shoulders, you realize this is no ordinary garment. This is the gambeson, the unsung hero of battlefield fashion. No rings, no plates, just layer upon layer of tightly packed linen, wool, or even horsehair, stitched in vertical or diamond-shaped patterns, the fabric creaking gently as you move. You glance down. No shine, no steel, and yet somehow you feel safer than you did in all that metal. Because this, dear friend, is armor. The gambeson doesn't get enough love. It's not dramatic. It doesn't make for impressive statues. No one sculpts heroic warriors wrapped in quilting. But it was everywhere. And it worked. In fact, historians still argue whether the gambeson alone might have saved more lives than all the metal armor combined. Its padding absorbs shock. It stopped cuts, worn under mail or plate. It cushioned blows and kept the hard stuff from turning your bones into soup. Worn alone, it could still deflect slashes and even blunt force trauma. Let's pause for a quirky aside in some parts of Europe, particularly France and England during the 12th and 13th centuries. The gambeson evolved into a standalone outer garment called the aketon or arming doublet, and in some peasant uprisings, soldiers wore nothing but gambesons, dozens of layers thick. Stiff as boards, they waddled like penguins and sweated like horses. But they could take a beating. There's even a dubious tale of a soldier surviving multiple sword blows in just a gambeson, then sitting down to eat lunch on the battlefield. Probably apocryphal, definitely memorable. You twist your arms. The gambeson creaks. It moves with you, not like armor, but like something more, human. And for once, it doesn't scream warrior. It just says prepared. Unlike mail or plate, it was cheap. Every soldier could have one. Local tailors could make them. You didn't need a forge, just fabric, needles, and time. Lots of time. A good gambeson could take weeks to stitch, and even longer to stuff properly. But once it was done, it could outlast campaigns. Commanders, Avic kingdoms. The inside smells faintly of sweat and straw. You're not surprised. Soldiers often slept in their gambesons, marched in them, fought in them, died in them. They were hard to clean, really hard, and after a few weeks of use, they smelled like a combination of mold, wet dug, and ambition. But you forgive the odor, because this is armor for the people, not elites, not emperors, just regular humans trying to stay intact. And guess what? Knights wore them too. Even the richest warlords, under all their fancy plate, always had a well-padded gambeson, because even the best steel means nothing if you don't have something soft underneath to absorb the blow. Imagine falling in full armor with no padding. It's like being dropped inside a steel drum down a flight of stairs. No thanks. You bend forward. Pick up your sword. And test your range of motion. No clinking. No catching. The gambeson shrugs with you. Effortless. It's heavy. Yes, often as much as 10 kilograms, but the weight is consistent. No overbearing pressure on the shoulders. No clumsy shifting of plates. Just comfort. In a very medieval sense of the word. Now, here's a juicy historical debate to whisper over your evening tea. Was the gambeson originally designed as armor on its own? Or merely as padding for heavier gear? Some argue it began as a quilted tunic for warmth, only later adapted for war. Others say it was always intended for battle, stitched from the beginning with violence in mind. There's evidence both ways. What's clear is that by the High Middle Ages, the gambeson was essential, especially in Europe. We're cold. Damp weather made, wearing mail alone, downright miserable. And guess what else gambesons could be fashionable? Knights embroidered theirs with family crests, dyed them bright colors, or added decorative stitching. Some were so stiff they could stand on their own. Others were slashed open in stylized patterns to show off the padded layers beneath. There was, believe it or not, a gambeson aesthetic. Medieval runway. But for people who might get stabbed, you adjust yours one last time before heading out. It doesn't gleam. It doesn't intimidate. But it whispers, I'm ready. Ready to block a blade. Ready to pad a fall. Ready to keep you alive long enough to matter. And so, you walk into the misty morning, wrapped in cloth and courage. You are not plated, not shining, not sculpted into divinity. But you are warm. You are mobile. You are ready. Because sometimes, the best armor isn't what people see. It's what you feel. Quilted strength. Stitched resilience. A quiet promise between you and the war ahead. Today, you're told to leave your armor behind? You frown? Understandably. It's battle day. Why wouldn't you wear every piece of protection you own? But your commander simply points to the gear slung across your back, a large wooden oval, rimmed with iron, and heavy enough to give your spine something to complain about. This, he says, is your armor. And suddenly, you begin to understand the truth. Shields were never just accessories. They were armor in their own right. You hoist it up and settle the weight against your shoulder. It's awkward. Yes, but it feels real. You're holding the scutum, Rome's most famous shield, curved like a barrel stave, tall enough to cover you from chin to shin, and wide enough to hide a secret or two. This isn't just a slab of wood. It's a moving wall. In fact, shields were often more crucial than body armor, especially in early warfare. Metal was expensive. Mail was rare. But wood leather animal glue, much more accessible. And a properly made shield could absorb sword blows, deflect arrows, and even catch thrown spears in its face without letting them through. It gave you cover. It gave you leverage. It gave you time. And unlike your torso armor, You could move a shield, angle it, slam it, use it like a door or a hammer or an umbrella. Because let's be honest, it rained a lot. You watch the more experienced soldiers practicing with theirs. One steps into formation and raises his shield to form the bottom row of a testudo, or tortoise, an interlocked barrier of shields that covered the unit from every direction. Arrows rain down like angry bees. But the formation holds. It looks absurd. It works anyway. Here's a quirky detail you'll like. The Roman scutum often had a central metal boss, called a umbo, sticking out like a belly button, made for violence. It wasn't just decorative, it was a battering ram. Soldiers used it to punch opponents, knock aside weapons, or just shout "move" with their body. Think of it as the medieval version of "excuse me" with a dash of concussion. And it wasn't just the Romans. The Greeks had the aspis, large and round, designed to balance on the shoulder and protect fellow hoplites in a phalanx. The Celts oval, or hexagonal shields, often decorated with swirling patterns and polished bronze. Germanic tribes went for smaller, round shields, more maneuverable for forest skirmishes. Even peasants used whatever scrap they could cobble together. Planks of wood, old barrels, doors. Yes, literal doors. Anything that could be hoisted and held. You run your fingers across the grain of your scutum. It's painted faded red, perhaps once bearing the emblem of your legion. The paint's chipped, the rim's dented. The leather edging is fraying, but it's yours. You feel safer with it than any chest plate. Why? Because it's alive in your hand. Armor just sits there. But this moves with you. Shields evolved over time to fit changing tactics. As heavy infantry gave way to more mobile fighting styles in the late Roman Empire, shields became smaller, lighter, more like the palma, a round buckler used by auxiliaries and cavalry. Laterstil? In the medieval period, you'd see the kite-shaped shields of Norman knights designed to protect the leg while on horseback. Then, heater shields, shaped like a flatiron, for jousts and duels. And eventually, the buckler. A tiny shield, no bigger than a dinner plate, used for parrying in close quarters duels. Historians still argue whether the scutum was phased out because of logistical issues or because Rome simply couldn't afford its complex construction anymore. What's certain is that shields reflected the identity of armies. Big shields meant group fighting, formation discipline, shared defense. Smaller shields, faster movement. Individual initiative. Flexible tactics. Your shield wasn't just armor. It was a mirror of your army's soul. And the spiritual side. Oh. Shields carried meaning. Warriors painted them with symbols of gods. Eagles. Lightning bolts. Mythic beasts. Some wrote their names on the back. Others etched prayer. There's even evidence that Roman soldiers left notes under their shield boss, tiny scrolls tucked away like secret charms. Personal. Powerful. Protective. You take your place in the formation. You interlock your scutum with the soldier beside you. The creak of wood and hiss of sliding leather sounds oddly soothing now. You glance through the gap above the rim. You can't see much, but that's okay. You don't need to. You're not alone. The commander shouts, "You brace?" The enemy rushes. And you hold? The first impact hits your shield like a thunderclap. Your knees buckle, Your arms jolt, but the shield holds. It always holds. It doesn't care who you are, rookie or veteran. It only asks that you carry it forward. One step at a time. And in that step, you understand armor protects you. But a shield, it protects everyone around you. 2. It's more than a barrier. It's a bond. A choice to say, not today. To chaos. A promise of survival. Held together with iron. Paint. And will. You squint eastward. The rising sun spilling over polished domes and glimmering mosaics. Gone are the boxy Roman forts and familiar Latin orders. Here, in Byzantium, armor speaks a different language, one of silk thread stitching, strange new patterns, and protection. That doesn't look like protection. As you pull on a new suit today, you realize this isn't just a change of clothes. It's a shift in how the body meets war. Welcome to the armor of the East. It's confusing at first. You reach for your usual segmentata or mail, but what you're handed feels like a vest made of overlapping fish scales. And then another soldier walks by in a suit of square plates tied together with rawhide. Another wears a tunic that looks soft, but rumor has it, it can stop an arrow. You blink? Are these soldiers armored, or just well-dressed? They are armored. Very much so. You're looking at lamella and scale armor. 2 of the most distinctive and effective forms of Eastern protection. They seem similar. But don't get them confused, or the quartermaster might make you clean a stable with your helmet. Again, scale armor is the older of the 2. Dating back to the Assyrians and Persians, it consists of small metal plates called scales, stitched or riveted onto a fabric or leather backing. They overlap like roof shingles, designed to deflect blows downward. You lift one up and feel the texture like dragon hide. Except squeakier. Lamellar, on the other hand, has no backing. The small rectangular plates, often called lamellae, are laced directly to each other in rows using cord or rawhide. It's lighter, more flexible, and easier to repair in the field. If one plate breaks, you replace just that one. No sewing, just threading and a strong set of fingers. Byzantine soldiers preferred lamella for cavalry and cataphracts, heavily armored horsemen who charged like steel meteors. You see one now? Riding past in shimmering rows of brass-colored lamellae, his armor glinting like fish scales in motion. His horse is armored too, and both look terrifying. This is warfare as spectacle. Warfare as dance? Now, here's your quirky fact for the night. Lamella wasn't just made of metal. In times of need or ingenuity, Eastern warriors made it from bone. Horn, hardened leather. Even lacquered wood. It wasn't ideal. Sure, but against certain weapons, it still worked. Mongol lamellar often used rawhide plates hardened in brine and fire. Light enough to run in, tough enough to shrug off slashes. You put yours on. It takes a while. Lamellar armor was modular. Yes, but fiddly? It's like strapping on a musical instrument. Once you're inside, though, you feel surprisingly mobile. More so than in plate or mail. It clatters a little when you jog, but not enough to ruin the mood. Byzantium's approach to armor wasn't just functional. It was philosophical. These were heirs to Rome. Yes, but also students of Persia, Egypt, and the Silk Road. Their armories blended west and east, creating armor that was light, beautiful, and versatile. You might see a commander wearing lamellar over a padded silk tunic with reinforced shoulders clavanion. They called it, or another, in full thorax armor. The Greek revival of muscle cuirass style. Only now combined with Eastern materials and sometimes under the armor. You'd find silk. Yes, silk. Sounds ridiculous, right? Historians still argue whether it was just for show or actually offered protection. But one theory suggests that tightly woven silk could catch arrowheads wrapping around them and preventing deep penetration. Mongol archers found it harder to remove arrows from silk-clad bodies. So next time someone mocks your fancy tunic, remind them it might save your spleen. You glance to the side and spot something even stranger. A helmet shaped like a dome, with a chainmail curtain hanging down from its edges, swaying as the wearer moves. It's the Spangenhelm, another Eastern innovation, made of segmented bands riveted together, often topped with a spike or plume. It's the spiritual cousin of lamella lightweight, modular, and easy to produce. And unlike the Roman helms of old, this one leaves more visibility, more breathing room. It's not as good for a statue, sure, but it's great for not dying. You wonder how the West missed this, how Rome clung to its traditions while the East danced forward with invention. Maybe it was pride. Maybe just logistics. But in Byzantium, function and beauty weren't enemies. They were partners. Even shields here bore inscriptions, saints, prayers, wards against evil. Armor wasn't just defense, it was faith. You catch your reflection in a polished bronze bowl. The lamellae curve around your chest. The cords flutter gently at your ribs. You don't look like a knight or a legionary. You look like something else entirely. A different kind of soldier. One shaped by trade winds and silk roads. By a city that never forgot how to be Roman, just chose to be Roman differently. You take your first steps in lamella, and it sings quietly, a faint metallic rustle, steady and fluid. Not a clank, not a groan, a whisper of resilience. You are wrapped in history and hope. And the road ahead is lined with golden tiles and arrows. You've come a long way from gleaming bronze pecs and rattling ringmail. Now, the wind howls over the channel, and rain spits sideways into your eyes. You're cold, damp, and riding with men who carry their armor like a second skin. Welcome to Norman territory, where chainmail becomes king, and the warriors around you wear it like they were born in it. You look around at the riders, each one clad head to toe in hauberk. A long-sleeved mail shirt that reaches past the knees. Some even have a split down the front and back, allowing them to ride without, slicing their armor open. Their coifs, mail hoods, are tucked tight over their heads, often attached directly to the hauberk, like one long iron hoodie. You blink. Everyone here looks the same, like iron-wrapped shadows. Chainmail isn't flashy anymore. It's not new. It's normal. It's the medieval version of a uniform, and if you want to be taken seriously on a Norman battlefield, you'd better be clinking. The Normans didn't invent mail, but they perfected its use in war. At the Battle of Hastings in 1066, the Bayeux Tapestry shows Norman knights clad in full mail with kite shields and conical helmets, dominating the Anglo-Saxon forces. You, as one of them, adjust your coif and try not to think about the mud, the rain, the English uphill. The arrows? Mail works well in this climate. Unlike segmented or lamellar armor, it doesn't rely on rigid construction. It flows. It flexes. It survives being soaked. You just have to keep it oiled, or risk turning into a walking pile of rust. Norman soldiers spent hours cleaning their mail after campaign. You remember the joke from camp? If your mail sings like a tambourine, it needs oil. If it doesn't sing at all, you're already dead. Here's tonight's quirky little truth. Some Norman mail hauberks weighed up to 27 kilograms. That's more than 50 pounds. But that didn't stop the warriors from wearing them on horseback, during marches, even while sleeping. And no, that's not a myth. Some soldiers did sleep in their armor. Not out of comfort, obviously, but to be ready if an ambush struck. You once tried it? Your hip still hasn't forgiven you. Mail was labor-intensive to produce, requiring blacksmiths to coil iron wire into spirals, cut it into rings, and then rivet each one individually. It could take months to make a single hauberk, which meant only the rich or their loyal retinues got the good stuff. Everyone else leather or wishful thinking. You pause for a moment, shifting the mail on your shoulders. It bites a little cold, links rubbing at the neck, the sleeves tugging at your wrists. Underneath, you wear a padded gambeson? Without it, the mail would grind your skin raw. With it, you're hot, but protected. And when that first axe comes swinging your way, you're going to be grateful. You're not alone in this. Your horse is armored. Too well. Partially, some higher nobles begin to experiment with barding mail capes over the neck. Reinforced leather on the chest. It's rare right now, but give it time. In a few centuries, cavalry will become mobile fortresses. For now, you and your steed are still vulnerable, but a little less so than your enemy. Norman tactics lean into this new chainmail confidence. Heavy cavalry charges become the bread and butter of conquest. You and your brothers ride in waves, relying on the mail to absorb missiles, the shield to deflect sword blows, and sheer mass to crush the enemy. You don't need elegance. You need momentum. Historians still argue whether chainmail truly changed the tide of battles like Hastings or whether it was superior organization, timing, and cavalry tactics. But you're here, and you feel the difference. When that sword glances off your chest, when the spear lodges in your mail but doesn't pierce, you thank every ring. But mail wasn't invincible. Blunt trauma could still break bones beneath it. That's why some Normans carried maces, blunt force weapons designed to bypass armor's strengths. The mail didn't stop the blow. It just meant you had to carry a few more bruises into battle and maybe a cracked rib or two. And yet, for its faults, you trust it. You've seen mail take an arrow to the shoulder. You've seen it tangle a sword so badly, the enemy had to kick you instead. And you've seen the opposite, those without armor. Cut down like wheat, you tighten the chin strap of your helmet. It's a simple nasal helm, a conical cap with a single iron strip down the middle of your face. It protects the forehead and nose, but not much else. No full face mask. No visor. Just enough to keep you alive if you don't blink. The horn sounds. The cavalry begins to move. Your horse snorts under you. Hooves clattering over wet earth. You grip your spear. Your shield. Your breath. The hauberk shifts with every motion. And you don't feel like a man anymore. You feel like a mechanism. Forged. Weighted. Ready? As you ride, the wind whistles through your mail. It sings. Not loudly, not triumphantly, but like the low hum of inevitability. The Normans are coming. The chainmail moves with them. And in that sound, the world hears the future of warfare clinking into place. You're tired. So is your mail. It's heavy, soaked with rain and effort. And it's not even lunchtime. You've worn this hauberk for days, long-sleeved, knee-length, cuff attached, mittens built in, split at the crotch for riding, and you wonder if this is the final form. But then you see him. He glides past you on horseback, every link gleaming, every layer tailored with a precision that says, this isn't just armor, it's elegance. His mail hood is separate, framing a clean, angular jaw. His sleeves end in tight cuffs reinforced with tiny plates. His thighs are protected with chausses, mail leggings strapped tightly from hip to ankle. This isn't just a hauberk anymore. It's the complete mail ensemble, a shimmering cathedral of rings from toe to temple. The hauberk has evolved. And it brought friends. You watch him dismount effortlessly. Armor, whispering, instead of clanking. He moves like a predator. Fluid, confident, and terrifying. Because this much mail isn't for show, it's a declaration. He is unreachable, uncuttable, untouchable. Or so he hopes. By the 12th century, chainmail wasn't just armor. It was the standard for the elite across Europe. Crusaders marched in it. Knights slept in it poorly. Kings wore gilded versions with silver inlay. It had become not just protection, but identity. And with time, it specialized. The hauberk became longer. The sleeves tighter, separate coifs offered flexibility and better layering. Chausses covered the legs completely, secured by leather straps or suspended from belts. Even mail mittens either sewn into the sleeves or separate protected the hands. Some were open-palmed so you could grip a sword better. Others fully enclosed, giving you the dexterity of an oven mitt. You now dress for battle like you're being shrink-wrapped in iron. But you don't complain. This armor moves with you, breathes with you. Well, a little, and it saved your life more than once. But let's be honest, it's exhausting. Putting it all on takes time and help. Removing it after a full day, like peeling wet bark from a tree. And the weight adds up. With a full suit of mail and underpadding, you might be carrying 25-30 kilograms of gear. That's a toddler in a backpack strapped to your ribs. Every time you climb stairs or a siege ladder, your legs faille le fort mal complet. Still, it's better than dying. Here's a quirky side note for tonight. Medieval manuscripts occasionally depict knights using P-flaps. Yes. Really? Male trousers were split or featured openings to allow bathroom breaks without fully disrobing. Imagine undoing your entire lower armor setup just to relieve yourself during a siege. Efficient. Not really. Embarrassing when you forget to rebuckle. Absolutely. You spend more and more time in your armor. And that means dealing with its realities. Rubbing. Chafing. Lice. The padding underneath soaks up everything's sweat. Rain. Blood. Regret. There's a reason soldiers called their gambeson a second skin. The first one didn't smell nearly as bad. Historians still argue whether full mail armor truly allowed knights to get up easily after falling. You've tested it. The answer is maybe. On flat ground, sure. in mud or under someone else's horse. Good luck. But with training, you can learn to roll, crouch, even run in mail. You just have to ignore the fact that every step sounds like someone rifling through a toolbox. Your sword hangs at your hip. You reach for it, and your gauntlet squeals across the hilt. The grip is worn, the leather soft from use. This isn't just a weapon. It's part of a whole. Every piece of your kit works together: armor, sword, shield, body, breath. And you feel calm. Because this much mail doesn't just shield you, it anchors you. You're not the fastest. You're not the flashiest. But you are steady. You are inevitable. You are a moving wall of iron will and riveted persistence. You walk past younger soldiers in partial kit short hauberks, open sleeves, knockoffs. They look at you with a mix of awe and pity. You smile. Just a little. They don't know yet what it feels like to survive an ambush because your thigh was wrapped in 1,000 rings. They don't know how a mail coif muffles the screams of battle just enough to keep your head clear. They will. You mount your horse. The mail shifts with you. Legs inkased. Torso tight. Helmet sekurt. You don't jingle anymore. You hum a low, metallic murmur that follows you into every fight. You're not wearing armor now. You are armor, forged and linked. Patient, persistent. And as you ride toward the setting sun, the weight on your shoulders is heavy, but never heavier than the man you were before you put it on. The sun is high. Your armor is hotter than a blacksmith's kiss. And the inside of your helmet smells like old socks and mild despair. But you keep walking. Because today, you get to wear something truly ridiculous. Something glorious. Something so over-engineered, it makes your mail hauberk feel like a t-shirt. Welcome to the era of the Great Helm. Also known, affectionately, as the walking bell. You lower it over your head. Darkness. Silence. The world vanishes except for a tiny sliver of light through a cross-shaped visor. Breathing becomes an event. Hearing a memory. Personal space. Non-existent. You are now a tin can with opinions. The Great Helm, or Home, appears in the 13th century and quickly becomes the knight's helmet of choice. It's a fully enclosed cylinder of iron or steel, often flat-topped, sometimes rounded, with narrow eye slits and breathing holes. The design, part intimidation, part practical. No vulnerable face, no weak spot in the skull. Just a full-head fortress. It's your own personal tower attached to your neck. It rests heavily on your padded coif. And the first thing you notice is the sound, or lack of it. Everything is muffled, distant. When people talk to you, you nod vaguely. You can't hear them. You can't see them. But you can headbutt them. And honestly, that's a trade-off you're fine with. And the heat, glorious, like being slow roasted inside a cauldron. Some knights line the inside of their helms with wool or even fur, which is great for winter tournaments, but in summer, you're dripping before the battle starts. Some accounts mention knights fainting from heat stroke before the fighting even began. Quirky fact of the evening? Knights sometimes remove their great helms mid-battle for better visibility and breathability and wore a smaller helmet underneath. Like a secret backup head, this sub-helmet, usually a secret helm or skull cap called a cervelier, offered basic protection in case your big fancy tin can got knocked off. Smart, right? Unless you forgot the chin strap. Still, the great helm had its advantages. It turned arrows. It deflected sword blows. It gave you a terrifying silhouette as you thundered across the battlefield. Nothing says unpleasant day ahead, like the faceless slab of metal charging at you with a lance. You touch the cross carved into your helm's faceplate. Many great helms featured religious engravings, prayers, saints. Crosses not just for fashion, but as spiritual armor. You weren't just wearing steel. You were wearing belief. Or at least broadcasting it to everyone you charged. But not all great helms were, well, great. Some were poorly fitted, others too heavy. Some had visors so narrow, you had to turn your whole body to look sideways. Historians still argue whether these helms were more common in tournaments than on real battlefields. Some believe they were ceremonial. Others swear they were frontline gear. You, currently blind and gasping, lean toward the ceremonial theory, if only to comfort yourself. Still, nothing beats the intimidation factor. You've seen enemies hesitate when they spot that blank iron mask. You've seen lesser fighters panic at the echoing roar inside your helm as you bellow. It's not just armor. It's performance. And then, of course, you fall. Because you didn't see the root sticking out of the dirt. Your helm slams into the ground with a bong that echoes across the hillside. You roll, flail, and finally, yank the thing off, gasping for air. The world floods back in sunlight. Birdsong, shouting. It's like being reborn. Sweetie, dizzy, mildly humiliated, but alive. You take a moment to recover, sipping water and glaring at your helmet like it personally betrayed you. Then, you clean the dirt off the faceplate and slide it back on. Because, yes, it's ridiculous. Yes, it's heavy, but it works. And when the arrows start flying, you'll be grateful for that inch of steel between your nose and oblivion. Let's talk customization. Nobles decorated their great helms with plumes, horns, crests, whatever made them stand out. In tournament, this was how the audience identified their favorite knight. On battlefields, slightly less useful. You're basically painting a bullseye on your forehead. But style is pain, especially in war. Later, evolutions introduced hinged visors, ventilation grills, and even mail aventails hanging down from the base to protect the neck. The great helm slowly morphed into sleeker designs like the bassinet, which we'll get to soon. But for now, you clunk along in your medieval diving bell, slightly ridiculous and strangely dignified. You rejoin your unit. You're taller now, bulkier. You look like a statue with legs. And when you move, people part. Not because they know who you are, but because they can't see anything behind that iron mask, and that friend is its own kind of power. Because behind the great helm, no one sees your fear. No one sees your doubt. They see only steel. And that illusion, sometimes, it's enough to win the day. The first time you wear it, you think you're going to drown in it? Not because it's wet. No. It's worse. It's soaked in heat, pressure, and sweat you didn't even know you could produce. You squirm, wiggle, and nearly swear, trying to get the seams to line up just right. And once you finally settle into place, it hits you. Padding under armor is its own kind of battle. You're wearing what knights and foot soldiers alike referred to as a gambeson, an aketon, a jack, or if they were feeling spicy, a coat of sweat and screams. Because beneath all the glorious mail and gleaming plates, there's always been this thick, quilted underlayer designed to cushion the blows, stop the chafing, and turn your entire body into a padded siege engine. And it matters. Oh? It matters. You take a few steps. The gambeson groans. You groan. It's stitched from linen or wool, sometimes stuffed with cotton, horsehair, or even old fabric scraps. Dozens of layers thick, all quilted into place with heavy thread. Its purpose is not just comfort, it's survival. Without it, mail will chew into your flesh like an angry cheese grater. Plate will crush your collarbones, and blunt weapons, they'll turn your bones into pudding. You pause and bounce slightly on your heels. The gambeson squelches. Delightful. But here's the hidden beauty it absorbs. You've been hit in the ribs before once with just mail. Once with mail and padding. The difference, night and day. The first hit knocked you flat. The second one just made you swear creatively and keep swinging. Quirky tidbit of the day. Some gambesons were so thick they could be worn as standalone armor. In fact, during the 100 Years' War, poorer infantry wore nothing else. These were called jacks, essentially overstuffed gambesons. And they became so popular in places like England and Flanders that entire battalions marched into battle looking like angry pillows with legs. Some were even studded with metal or covered in additional hide to improve protection. Stylish. Not exactly, but they got the job done. The padding has its own regional flavor. In Eastern Europe, the Zubun offered similar protection, tailored with local materials. In Italy, quilted doublets became fashion statements and armor bases. Even Ottoman soldiers wore padded jackets underneath their silken mail combinations. Padding is the great equalizer everywhere. Everyone needs it. Historians still argue how thick the average gambeson was. Some say half an inch. Others claim up to 4 inches. Especially for jack armor. Archaeological finds are rare. But textile impressions on rusted mail give clues. The real answer. As thick as your wallet and your pain tolerance could handle. And then there's the fit. A good gambeson is snug. Too snug. You can't breathe. Too loose. It bunches under your armor like a badly tucked bedsheet. You've seen knights throw tantrums because their squire laced it unevenly. You've also been that squire. You still have the dent in your pride. Lacing it up is its own ritual. Some are buttoned, others tied. A few even buckled. You wince as your fellow soldier yanks the cords on your sleeve tight. He mutters, "For glory." You mutter back, "For circulation?" He doesn't laugh. Probably because he can't breathe either. You pull your mail hauberk on top. The padding swallows the weight. Suddenly, the 20 kilograms of iron doesn't seem quite so back-breaking. The gambeson acts like a shock absorber, like a buffer between you and the cruelty of the world. And in this moment, you love it. Even if it smells like wet cabbage and defeat, by the time you strap on your helmet, you're swaddled like a newborn berserker. Layers of linen, mail, maybe plate. You feel enormous. Heavy, safe, and vaguely like a stuffed pastry. Then someone slaps you on the back in encouragement. And the armor drives your gambeson, stitching straight into your shoulder blades. You wince. They laugh. Standard ritual. You mount your horse, or more accurately, you climb it with great effort and a questionable grunt. The gambeson bends with you, resists, then yields. It's not graceful, but it works. You ride forward, the thick fabric rubbing at your neck, your ribs, your thighs. You'll have chafing later. You always do. But it doesn't matter. You know, now this isn't just under armor. This is armor. Armor of the invisible kind. The kind that takes the blow without being seen. That soaks up the hit, the heat, the insult, and gives you the chance to rise again. In that way, the gambeson is a little like you. Soft where it needs to be. Tough everywhere else. Not always appreciated. Often taken for granted. But without it, nothing else works right. So you keep riding. The sun climbs. The armor weighs. The gambeson breathes with you. Every stitch. A silent oath I've got you. You arrive late to the courtyard and instantly regret it. Everyone's already assembled rows of knights standing still as statues. Steel, glinting in the sunlight, capes gently fluttering in the breeze. The instructor turns, points at you, and gestures with a silent, scornful sweep of the hand. You shuffle into place. Armor clinking with every step. You are about to learn what it means when armor stops being just defense and starts being display. Welcome to the era of the knightly ensemble, where every piece of gear says something loud. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It crept in over decades. But somewhere between the 12th and 14th centuries, armor stopped just being about survival and started whispering of rank, wealth, and identity. It didn't just protect. It performed. You look down at your gear and realize you're wearing more than just chainmail now. You've got a surcoat draped over it, brightly colored and embroidered with your family crest. You have spurs polished to a blinding shine, buckled with silver clasps. Even your belt is ornate carved, tasseled, and possibly worth more than your horse. You are, in effect, a mobile coat of arms. And you are not alone. All around you, other knights display their own particular flair. That one's armor is trimmed with velvet. The one beside him wears a mail coif lined with gold thread. Over there, a surcoat made of imported silk. And across the yard, the fanciest knight of them all just removed his helmet to reveal curls. Perfect. Perfumed. Battle-ready curls. You swallow your jealousy. Quirky fact of the day. Some knights had their armor custom scented. Lavender for the cultured. Musk for the dramatic. And rosewater if you were trying to flirt mid-duel. No. Really, tournaments weren't just about fighting. They were about making a scene. You shift uncomfortably in your own gear. Your hauberk is respectable. Your gambeson isn't bleeding through. But your surcoat has a grease stain, and your scabbard's leather is cracked. In this world, that's practically armor blasphemy, because tournaments are about more than strength. They're the medieval version of LinkedIn meets WrestleMania. Nobles watch from balconies. Ladies toss favor ribbons. Scribes note everything. And if you show up in tarnished mail and a floppy belt, you're remembered not as a hero, but as that guy. You glance down the line and spot something new plate reinforcement creeping in. One knight wears Cood's steel elbow guards strapped over his mail. Another wears a coat of plates. A series of small metal plates riveted between layers of cloth, usually hidden beneath a surcoat. It looks like a gambeson, but rattles like a chest of drawers. One particularly fashionable knight is even experimenting with Pollen's knee guards that wrap like blooming iron tulips. And then there's him, Anders Last. His armor is immaculate. Mail chaucers hug his legs. Plate gauntlets glint like mirrors. His great helm has a plume, a literal feathered plume rising from the top like a peacock in mid-war cry. His surcoat trails the ground, and on his chest, a heraldic lion. Claws extended, embroidered in gold thread, so thick it casts shadows. He knows everyone's watching. That's the point. You, meanwhile, are trying to remember which leg your sword goes on. Historians still argue whether this shift toward decorative, symbolic armor weakened the martial edge of the knight class, or simply enhanced it. Some say it was all pretense, that the flashy tournaments distracted from real war. Others claim it made warriors even more fearsome, because now, a knight didn't just fight for glory. He wore it. And yet, it wasn't all glamour. Armor still had to work. That coat of plates? It may look like fancy quilting, but it'll stop a lance better than mail alone. Those gauntlets, they'll crush a skull just as easily as hold a goblet. Even that plumed helm, it's thick enough to take a hammer strike, even if it makes you look like a well-dressed chimney sweep. You find yourself stepping into formation, shoulders back, head high. The instructor barks an order. You move in sync. Armor kreaks. Surcoats flatter. For a moment, you don't feel like a latecomer. You feel like part of something, an order, a tradition, a spectacle built on steel and silk. And as the trumpets sound for the joust, you realize the truth of this ensemble. It's not about hiding behind armor. It's about becoming it. Embodying the ideals you wear valor. Honor. Defiance. Drama. You mount your horse. Your chainmail shifts. Your surcoat flows. And as you lower your helmet, your face disappears, replaced by the crest. The lion, the legend. You're not a man anymore. You are a symbol. And symbols don't just fight, they shine. You're no longer clanking around in sacks of rings. Today, you are encased fitted, polished, and hinged. As your squire secures the last strap on your gauntlet and clicks a tiny locking mechanism into place, you stretch your arms and feel it fluid movement. Full protection. This isn't just armor. This is a work of mechanical genius. Welcome to the age of Gothic plate, where steel doesn't just protect, it performs. You glance down. Your body now resembles an articulated puzzle of dark. Gleaming plates curved and fluted like a cathedral in motion. Every edge is beveled, every line purposeful. You move your shoulder, and the pauldron glides over the reverbrace. You take a step, and the cuisses shift along your thighs with barely a whisper. And the knees, beautiful polens shaped like blooming petals, cupping your joints with terrifying elegance. You're not just wearing armor, you're wearing architecture. The term Gothic comes later, historians. always naming things centuries after the fact, but the style originates in 15th century Germany and spreads across Europe like wildfire. It replaces the clunky, rounded look of early plate with sharp ridges, flared edges, and pointed designs. The armor breathes drama. It's not just functional. It's flamboyant, the Renaissance runway before there was a runway. And, oh, it works. This armor isn't made from one giant mold. It's dozens, hundreds of carefully shaped pieces: breastplate, backplate, tassets, vambraces, sabaton for the feet, all forged and fitted with exactitude. The articulation, those overlapping plates linked with rivets and leather, is what allows you to move, twist, and even somersault, if you're the daring sort. Quirky fact for the evening: some noblemen in Gothic plate armor danced in it. Yes, danced. Not mid-battle, though. That would be impressive. But in ballrooms, tournaments, and elaborate performances. The armor was so well articulated that knights could perform full courtly dances, twirling and bowing without sounding like someone dropped a toolbox down the stairs. But Gothic armor isn't just sleek, it's smart. The ridges and fluting you see, they aren't just decorative. They increase the structural strength of the metal while reducing weight, like the folds of an accordion. They reinforce the plate against incoming blows, especially from maces and warhammers. The pointed contours also help deflect blades and arrows away from vital areas. And it's light. Lighter than you'd think. A full suit of Gothic plate might weigh around 20-25 kilograms less than a fully loaded modern backpack. And unlike mail, it distributes that weight evenly across your body. With proper training, you can run, jump, and ride for hours. You are, quite literally, a walking exoskeleton of murder. Of course, you need help getting into it. No knight goes fully plated alone. Your squire has memorized every strap, every pin, every plate's exact order of attachment. Getting dressed can take 30 minutes or more, and that's if nobody sneezes or loses a buckle. Once you're in, though, you feel invincible, and you look it, too. You turn to a nearby knight. His armor is similarly Gothic, but with different flourishes. His gauntlets flare at the wrist. His helm bears sculpted ridges that give him the face of a hawk. Even within the rigid design rules, style varies. The Germans love their sharp angles and elongated curves. The Italians prefer smoother, more anatomical plates, less Goth cathedral, more Greco-Roman sculpture. Historians still argue which Gothic school of armor was more practical in combat. Some say German fluting helped the most with strength. Others insist Italian articulation allowed greater finesse. Either way, both looked incredible in portraits. Because let's not forget, armor now had audience. It wasn't just about battle. It was about appearance, status, messaging. You unsheathe your sword, also updated to reflect the times. Long, tapered, meant for thrusting through plate gaps. Because yes, even the best armor has weaknesses: the underarms, behind the knees, the visor slit. Precision matters now. A glancing blow is nothing. A well-placed thrust that ends stories. You take a breath? The air filters through your Bavora plate gorget, guarding your neck and lower face. Above it, your armet fits tightly around your head. Visor down, vision narrow, but it feels like a cockpit. You're not isolated. You're focused. And then you move. You charge, and the armor, this glorious sculpture of steel, moves with you. Not a burden, not a costume, but a collaborator. The enemy flees before the sound of plate on earth. You see yourself reflected in a shattered blade, faceless, invulnerable, inevitable. Later, you'll remove the helm and reveal your sweat-drenched face. You'll stagger free of the layers. You'll wash, eat, rest. But for now, you are the armor, and the battlefield is your cathedral. The clangs are sharper now, less chaotic. You're surrounded by fighters who aren't just armored, they're engineered. And as you rotate your wrist, raise your arm, and crouch to dodge a passing blow, you realize something your armor is keeping up. Every hinge, every pivot point bends with you, not against you. Today's lesson: the beauty of joints and hinges, the unsung orchestra beneath every plate. You take a step, and your cuisses flex at the thigh. The polens at your knees pivot on rivets. Guiding the curve of your legs, your greaves shift to accommodate your stride. It's not magic. It's medieval biomechanics, and you're now a machine made of man and metal. Back in the early days, armor was simple. Coverage first, movement second. Mail was forgiving, but once plate came into fashion, warriors had to rethink how the human body moved. Rigid armor was a death sentence on horseback or in close combat. So blacksmiths got clever. They started articulating the joints, creating overlapping plates connected by rivets, sliding rivets, straps, and leather lames that allowed for natural range of motion. Nowhere is this clearer than in your elbows. The cauter, a curved plate that guards the elbow, is no longer a fixed piece. It hinges outward with your arm, like a beetle's wing. Beneath it, the rear brace upper arm and vambrace forearm interlock like puzzle pieces, each moving in harmony. You can swing a sword, lift a shield, or pick up your helmet without sounding like a box of wrenches. Even the fingers aren't forgotten. Your gauntlets now feature articulated fingers, each joint protected by tiny overlapping plates called finger lames riveted onto a leather glove. It's like armor made out of origami. Delicate, deadly. You flex them and feel each digit move independently. You could hold a quill or crush a windpipe. Both feel equally possible. And here's your quirky moment of the evening. Some of the best armored joints weren't just about function, they were about flair. Late 15th century German Gothic armor often featured heart-shaped cauters and fluted pollens with designs so elaborate they resembled blooming flowers. Some believe these were inspired by religious or romantic symbolism. Others say the knight just wanted to look fabulous while dodging arrows. Either way, respect. But articulation wasn't just for elegance. It saved lives. A well-placed floating rivet could allow a plate to slide slightly during impact, redirecting the force. Flexible lames at the waist let you twist, duck, and roll. Even helmets got in on the action like the armet, which opened on both sides with tiny hinges, allowing a snug fit without sacrificing mobility. You're not locked in. You're enclosed. And that's a huge difference. Historians still debate who pioneered the most advanced articulation. Was it the Italians? With their anatomical harnesses and smooth flowing lines? Or the Germans? with their fluting and mechanical genius. Truth is, both pushed each other forward. In war, in fashion, in function, competition fueled innovation. And your joints are thankful for it. You kneel experimentally. The polins hold. The greaves split slightly at the ankle. Your sabatons flexing just enough to let your foot bend. You stand again without assistance? Not bad for a walking metal man. Of course. These joints come with maintenance. Hinges rust. Rivets loosen. Straps break. You carry a tiny kit for adjustments. Oil. Via. A few spare pins. And your squire. They've memorized every joint, like a surgeon. Don't forget the elbow hinge. They say before battle, you pretend to be annoyed. You're secretly grateful. You notice another knight nearby? Struggling. His cowder is too tight. His vambrace pinched. You offer to help. As you loosen the strap and reset the rivet, he sighs in relief. And just like that, the armor flows again. It moves. You nod. Armor isn't just about what you wear. It's about how it moves with you. Or doesn't. And here's the deeper truth. These joints and hinges, they're symbols. Of compromise. Of engineering. Of evolution. They represent a shift in thinking from brute protection to symbiosis. You don't fight against your armor. You fight with it? You've learned its rhythm, its limits, its music. You unsheathe your sword, raise your shield, and fall into stance. The plates shift. The hinges breathe. You are not a prisoner of iron. You are the conductor of a mechanical symphony. Your armor doesn't hinder you. It amplifies you. The ground trembles. Not from your feet, but from something heavier, larger, clanking toward the horizon with the slow inevitability of a storm. You look up and see it, a silhouette in motion, glinting with steel. Snorting steam. It's not a monster. It's a warhorse. And it's wearing armor. You stare in awe. Because if you thought plating up a man was complicated, wait until you try dressing a 200-pound creature with opinions. Welcome to the majestic and slightly ridiculous world of horse armor. Or barding. You step closer. The rider dismounts. And squires swarm the beast like a pit crew. One lifts the chanfron. The headpiece. Up and over the horse's muzzle. Another buckles the crinnet, protecting the neck. A third adjusts the pectoral. A broad chest plate that hangs over the front, like a gleaming apron of vengeance. There's flanchards for the flanks. A cropper for the rear. Even caparison, cloth coverings. Sometimes kilted. Sometimes richly embroidered, draped over everything. Just to remind everyone, this isn't just war. It's theater. Your own horse watches this with mild alarm. You glance at your saddlebag. Inside is your horse's gear less impressive. Less complete. You have a partial barding kit. Made of hardened leather, reinforced with metal plates. It's lighter. Easier to remove, and less likely to cause a temper tantrum. Because, let's be honest, horses aren't always cooperative when you start strapping cold steel to their faces. But the logic makes sense. In the late 13th and 14th centuries, as knights became walking fortresses, the warhorses beneath them became glaring weak points. A single arrow. A spear to the belly. or a sling stone to the face could topple a mounted knight faster than you could say vet bill. And so, barding evolved not just to protect the horse, but to keep the entire knightly system intact. You pat your steed's neck. He snorts, ears twitching as you gently test the crinnet. Even basic horse armor was a marvel of engineering. It had to move with the horse's gait, not chafe, not overheat, and still offer coverage. Articulated plates along the neck flexed as the horse turned. The chanfron was sometimes fitted with eye guards, though many knights skipped those to avoid blinding their mount or, worse, turning it into a battering ram with no steering. Quirky fact, some war horses had horns. Not real ones. Of course, just decorative metal or wood spikes attached to their helms to make them look like unicorns or demonic beasts. Terrifying in theory. Hilarious in execution. Especially if the horse had no idea what it looked like. The wealthiest knights spared no expense. Italian barding was often elaborately fluted, matching Gothic plate aesthetics. In France, caparisons bore the knight's full heraldic colors, flowing behind the horse like a parade banner. Even the stirrups, reins, and bridles could be decorated with jewels or embroidery. But the armor came at a cost weight. A fully barded war horse might carry an extra 40 kilograms of metal. Add the knight, his gear, and saddle. You're looking at over 130 kilograms total. Only the strongest breeds could manage that destriers, specifically bred for power and stamina. They weren't racers. They weren't graceful. They were living battering rams. Shorter than modern horses. Yes, but muscular. Fearless. And disturbingly good at trampling. You watch as the barded knight remounts. The armor moves with the horse, not against it. The chanfron dips. The patral shifts as the horse trots up, distributing weight and deflecting blows. It's not just a mount now. It's a partner in armor. A teammate with hooves and momentum. Historians still argue how common full barding really was. Some claim it was reserved for tournaments and pageantry. Others say that in late medieval warfare, especially during the 100 Years' War and the Italian campaign's partial or full horse armor, saw real, muddy, bloody use. The truth, likely somewhere in the middle. Not every knight had it. But those who did, they changed the game. You adjust your own saddle, sliding your horse's lighter patral into place. It's not flashy. It's not full plate, but it might deflect a glancing arrow. And today, that's enough. The trumpet sounds. Knights gather. The barded horses line up a shimmering tide of steel and silk and steam. You fall into formation. A little less decorated. A little less invincible, but ready. Because armor isn't about perfection. It's about preparation. And this is teamwork forged in iron. You look forward. Your mount paws the dirt. Restless. And you know when the charge begins? When the world blurs into hoofbeats and banners, you won't ride alone. You'll ride with armor at your back. Beneath your legs. Beside your heart. You'll ride with a creature that wears war like a second skin. And together, you'll become unstoppable. There's something off about the armor in front of you. Not wrong. Exactly just exaggerated. The shoulders are massive. Curved like the wings of a beetle. The helmet is narrow but topped with a flag. The shield is almost comically large. And the color, bright crimson. With golden embellishments that shimmer even in cloudy light. You blink, then it hits you. This isn't battlefield gear. This is tournament armor. And its motto is simple: go big or go back to the keep. You take a few cautious steps closer. The knight is adjusting his massive grand guard, a removable plate bolted to the left shoulder for jousting. It looks like a mailbox glued to his arm. It is ridiculous. It is also genius, because when a 3-meter lance comes at you at full gallop, you want something between it and your collarbone. Tournaments were the medieval Super Bowl half-training exercise, half social event, and entirely an excuse to show off. You wore armor not just to survive, but to be seen. Your plate wasn't just protective, it was louder than your herald's trumpet. And that meant modifications. Big ones. Let's start with the helms. You've seen a few practical great helms in battle, but these are castles for your face. Thick, heavy, barely ventilated, often worn over a lighter arming cap or secret helm. Some were bolted shut from the outside, so you couldn't remove it during a bout. If you fainted or choked inside, that's someone else's problem. And the decorations unhinged. Feathers, horns, wings, dragon heads. If it could be carved or painted, someone probably put it on their helm. Quirky note: one 14th century tournament helm had a full model ship mounted on top. Yes, a boat. On a helmet? Because subtlety is for peasants. Armor wasn't just modified for show. It was reshaped to fit specific events. For jousting, you wore a frog-mouthed helm, a bizarre, upward-angled visor that forced you to tilt your head back to see. Great for deflecting lances. Terrible for walking through doorways. Your shield, too, was tailored. The jousting shield, or tilting shield, was curved and padded, designed to catch lances and reduce the risk of impalement. Some even had spring-loaded brackets to eject a broken lance more dramatically. Style points were real. Then there's the horse armor. Oh, we're back to that. But this time, it's absurd. Brightly dyed caparisons with family emblems, bedazzled patrals, glittering chanfrons with gilded brows. You once saw a barded horse with mirrors stitched into its cloth. Dazzling spectators and confusing pigeons. Historians still argue how much of this armor was functional and how much was costume. Some say it was all for flair. Others insist the heavier components actually added safety, especially in jousts of peace, where lances were tipped with coronels' multi-pronged ends to reduce penetration. The truth, it depended on your wallet, your pride, and your ability to stand upright in 70 pounds of steel peacocking. You walk into the competitor's tent and feel the atmosphere shift. No blood, no war cries, just the tension of noble ambition. Knights posing, squires polishing, a bard in the corner composing a ballad before the match. You realize this isn't battle, this is pageantry weaponized. And there were rules. So many rules. No, aiming below the waist. No striking unarmored areas. No attacking once the helm's off. Every tournament had its own code, some enforced by heralds with whistles, others by the crowd's collective gasp when someone cheated, and punishment, public shaming. Revoked honors, or in some cases, having to drink wine from your own cracked helm. Humbling, but don't be fooled. Tournaments were still dangerous. Plenty of knights died. Collapsed lungs, Broken necks. One poor soul even drowned when his helm filled with mud. It was war in costume, and death still accepted the invitation. You tug your own tournament kit closer? It's heavier than your battlefield set. But also, more you. You chose the colors. You designed the crest. You requested the little embossing of a fox on your gauntlet because cunning beats brute force? At least in theory. You mount your horse. Trumpets blare. The field opens. Flags wave. The crowd roars not because they know who you are, but because they're ready for the show. And when you ride forward, lance leveled. On your helm, narrowing your vision to a single point on the other knight's chest, you feel it again. This armor is absurd and magnificent. It may not be made for survival, but it was made for glory. You're in position. Lance ready. Armor locked tight. Your vision narrowed to a slit. The joust begins. And then snap! Your opponent's lance strikes your pauldron and shatters into a spectacular arc of splinters. The crowd gasps. You remain upright, mostly dignified, and very grateful that his weapon didn't punch through your chest. But when you return to your tent and strip down, you see it? Dent? A deep one. Right over your heart. You press your hand to it, feeling the steel bend ever so slightly inward. And in that moment, you remember what your captain once told you: armor evolves when something breaks through it, and nothing breaks armor quite like a crossbow. Yes. Dear friend, it's time to meet the ultimate party crasher of the armored world, the crossbow bolt. Silent, swift, brutal, and, if aimed right, totally capable of making your Gothic plate look like a soup can. Let's rewind a bit. In the 11th and 12th centuries, crossbows were already on the rise, but by the 13th and 14th, they were becoming terrifying. They weren't just tools. They were equalizers. A peasant with 2 days of training could, in theory, punch a bolt through a noble's mail-covered chest, assuming he hit the right spot and wasn't immediately trampled by the guy's horse. And armor responded, "You watch the armorer now," hammering out your dented plate, muttering curses about those cursed Genoese. He knows this is the arms race, the back-and-forth game between offense and defense that defines the evolution of every suit of armor. As weapons grow sharper, stronger, more precise, the armor must follow. It must adapt, or it must die. First, it was mail that had to change. It was great for cutting attacks, but bolts pierced right through it. That led to coats of plates, reinforced with brigandines, hidden beneath surcoats. Then came solid breastplates, curved to deflect missiles and lances. But even those had their limits. So what next? More angling, more fluting, more layering. Late medieval plate armor became a marvel of aerodynamic defense shaped to deflect, not stop. That's the key. You don't absorb the force. You redirect it. The classic glance and slide. It's armor as geometry. Here's your quirky fact for the night. Some breastplates were even proof-tested by firing a crossbow at them. The resulting dent, called a proof mark, was left on purpose, like a scar of survival. It said, "This armor passed the test. Try me." You remember that as you stare at the dent on your own, you didn't pass with flying colors, but you passed. Crossbows weren't alone in pushing armor to its limit. Longbows, especially those used by English archers, fired arrows with terrifying draw weights. At the Battle of Crécy 1346, and Agincourt 1,415. Volleys of arrows darkened the sky, and even well-armored knights were unhorsed, crushed, or suffocated beneath their fallen comrades. Armor markers paniked, then innovated. Faceplates became thicker, visors narrower, gorget plates reinforced the neck. Even gussets, small flexible mail inserts, were added at the armpits and groin to protect the gaps that plate alone couldn't cover. Historians still argue how effective armor was against these weapons. Some say a properly made plate breastplate could withstand most arrows and bolts. Others argue that point-blank hits, especially from powerful siege crossbows, could penetrate. What we know for sure is that soldiers adapted. They lowered visors. They added padding. They fought smarter. You now watch as your comrade prepares for a siege. His armor is thicker. His helmet has fewer openings. His shield is long and narrow, meant for kneeling behind as arrows rain from above. He wears reinforced gauntlets because on a siege ladder, even a scraped knuckle can mean death. Meanwhile, the attackers mount a windlass crossbow, cranking the string back slowly, steadily. The bolt they load is heavier than a kitchen knife. The moment it's loosed, it whistles through the air and punches a hole through the wooden palisade. You don't want to know what that would do to your thigh. You adjust your leg armor cuisse, reinforced at the knee, then your tassets, swinging from your waist to shield the upper legs. Together, they form a barrier. Not perfect, not unbreakable, but it might just be enough. And this is the paradox you live with now. The better your armor becomes, the more powerful the weapons aimed at you. It's a constant race, a terrible game of who can outdevelop whom. You ride into battle knowing that one well-aimed bolt could end it all. But you also ride in steel that was designed for this moment, tested, forged, worn by generations who face the same risks. Your armor is an answer to a question that keeps changing. You adjust your vambrace, feel the plate shift into place, and you smile not because you're invincible, but because you're prepared for what's next. You're armoring up. Usual cuisse, greaves, breastplate, all the standard gear. But something feels off. Not wrong. Just different. Lighter. You glance at the pile beside you. No backplate today. No shoulder pauldrons. Your gauntlets are thinner. Your helmet's got more air holes than usual. The war's still on. Sure. But today's battle is quicker. Meaner. Less like a parade. More like a bar. Fight in a barn. Welcome to the era of adaptation where knights ditch full suits and embrace the half-armor compromise. You sling on a breastplate and brigandine. Your arms free, except for thin leather sleeves. You still wear mail at the elbows and armpits. No one's that crazy, but you're moving faster. You test your range. Yes. You can raise your arms overhead. Yes. You can crouch without needing a pulley system. Yes. You can breathe. This is what battle looks like when gunpowder joins the party. By the late 15th century, firearms are more than novelty. They're problematic. The arquebus and early shoulder-fired gunfires lead balls capable of punching through even a thick steel plate at close range. That means your perfectly fluted Gothic cuirass. Still beautiful. Still historic. But now, occasionally, decorative. So the logic shifts. If armor can't stop bullets, maybe it doesn't need to try. Maybe it just needs to protect what it can. Knights begin to wear 3/4 harnesses. Or half plates, combining core protection with limb flexibility. Breastplate and backplate stay. Tassets dangle at the hips. But the legs, maybe not. Arms optional. Helmet, a lighter one. Often with a Bergonet or Morion, open-faced, crested, and absurdly stylish. You watch the younger men prepare. Some wear buff coats, thick leather jackets, reinforced with steel or brass studs. Others wear mail sleeves over padded jerkins. One guy's got a mail collar. Put no helmet. Madness. But maybe he knows something you don't. Maybe he's planning to move more than block. And here's your quirky historical tidbit by the 16th century. Breastplates were sometimes proofed not just against arrows, but against bullets. How a gun was fired directly at the armor. If the shot didn't penetrate, the dent was left visible, a proof mark. Some armorers even faked them, hammering indentations to give the illusion of bulletproofing. Early marketing strategy, or fraud. Historians still argue, you tap your own plate, looking for the mark. It's there, a shallow, oval dimple over the left pectoral, a bruise in the metal, and somehow, a reassurance. Someone tried. It held. Maybe it'll hold again. Half armor isn't laziness. It's strategy. The nature of warfare is changing. No more long. Elegant battles of knightly pride. Now it's ambushes. Pikes. Black powder. And muddy skirmishes in bad weather. The battlefield is faster. Louder. Less glorious. And full of surprises. You now ride into formation beside pikemen in leather coats, musketeers with powder horns, and light cavalry in padded tunics. You're the only one wearing a breastplate. You feel heavy. You feel old. You also feel oddly safe. And here's the tension armor still matters. But it's not everything. In fact, some officers avoid full armor, fearing that it makes them too visible a target. Better to be nimble. Anonymous. Living. This is warfare by attrition. A chessboard made of smoke. But in the thick of it, armor still saves lives. A glancing saber strike to the ribs your plate holds. A wild arrow from the chaos. Deflected by your tasset, even falling from your horse, the cuirass absorbs the worst of the blow. Your half armor may look minimalist, but it still does the job. You crouch behind a ruined wall, breathing hard. Smoke fills the air. Someone nearby reloads a musket. Another soldier runs past, wearing only a breastplate, trousers, and a really optimistic expression. You watch the shot fly. Sparks blooming. Then, you charge again. Not because you feel brave, but because your armor isn't everything. It's just enough. And that's what this new world demands. You're not an invincible knight anymore. You're a survivor. Adaptable. Practical. Tactical. Half armor for a half-predictable world. You crouch behind a barrel, shield raised, breathing in smoke, sweat, and just a hint of pickled herring. Around you, the din of chaos continues. Shouts, gunfire, hooves, iron scraping wood, and then you spot them. A dozen men, ragged and muddy, fast drawn, but eyes determined. Their gear, a collection of odds and ends, battered helms, bits of mail, coats stitched with old leather, even a kitchen pot repurposed as a helmet. You've just encountered the unsung warriors of every army, the ones wearing armor of the peasants. It's not glamorous. It's not symmetrical. But it's honest. These men didn't stroll into a blacksmith's shop with a noble's purse. They scavenged, borrowed, bartered, and made their armor one scrap at a time. And it works. You look closer. One man wears a jack of plates, a canvas or leather jacket with hundreds of small metal plates sewn inside, not factory issued, but hand-fitted. Sometimes even made from cut-up old armor or butchered cooking pans. Another wears a brigandine, its rivets visible in rows across a faded red outer shell. It flaps open at the side, repaired clumsily with string. Still protective. Still proud. Then there's the helmets. Oh, the helmets? One soldier's got a kettle helm. Wide-brimmed like an iron sun hat. Great for deflecting overhead blows and rain. Another has a conical spangion helm. It's strips of steel riveted together like a child's drawing of a knight. And yes, one has an actual pot, complete with handle, now bent and tied to a chin strap made from rope and spite. You smile, not mockingly, but with deep respect, because this improvised armor is what war looks like when resources are scarce, but willpower isn't. Quirky fact. For today, in several peasant revolts across medieval Europe, like the Jacquerie in France or the German peasants' war armor, was cobbled together from farming tools and household items. Shovel blades became chest plates. Wooden barrel staves were repurposed into makeshift cuirasses. Some rebels even wore multiple layers of clothing soaked in brine to stiffen them what they lacked in metallurgy. They made up for with creativity. You nod to one of them, an older man. Lines carved deep into his face. His gambeson is patched with denim. His belt holds a knife, a hammer, and a charm made of bone. He meets your gaze with calm confidence. He's fought in these clothes before. He'll fight in them again. There's something freeing about this armor. No two sets are alike. Some men favor mobility, just a leather jerkin and faith. Others layer mail over cloth, over hide, making themselves nearly immovable. One has wooden planks strapped to his forearms. He calls them braces. They double as chopping boards. You do not laugh. Historians still argue how effective peasant armor truly was. Some say it offered psychological protection more than practical defense. Others point to recorded cases where jacks of plates deflected arrows and even light sword strikes. What's clear is this: they wore what they had. And in doing so, they proved that armor isn't about luxury. It's about survival. You lean back, thinking about your own kit polished, fitted, worth more than most farmsteads. You feel grateful. You also feel grounded, because these men remind you that protection isn't just in steel. It's in ingenuity, in determination, in a worn-out vest that says, "I will not go quietly." Battle begins again. You move forward. The peasants move too. Not behind you, but beside you. Their armor isn't elegant, but it speaks. It says, "I chose to fight. I chose to survive. I am here. And I am not easy prey." And for today, that's enough. You pause before stepping into the chapel. Not for prayer, though you probably should. No, you're here Because your new cuirass has something curious etched into it. A cross. Faint, but unmistakable. Right above the heart. And when you asked the armorer why it was there, he just grunted. For God. You hadn't thought much about it. But now, standing here in the glow of stained glass and incense, you begin to feel the weight of it, of religious symbolism in armor. Armor, you realize, doesn't just guard the body, it guards the soul. Or, at least, it tries to. You sit for a moment in a wooden pew. The steel of your gauntlet, cold against the back of your wrist. You glance around. Banners hang above, each bearing a holy sigil. Some familiar crosses. Swords pointed heavenward. Others, stranger angels trampling serpents. Saints in full plate, striking down demons with poleaxes. And then you see it, an effigy of a knight in repose, carved in marble, hands clasped in prayer, and wearing a full suit of armor. It's not just grave decoration. It's a testament, because for many warriors, armor was more than metal. It was faith made visible. As Christianity spread across Europe, and holy wars began to shape military campaigns, religious symbols became common on gear. Crosses engraved on breastplates, verses scratched into the inside of helmets, relics stitched into arming jackets. You've even heard stories, maybe rumors of knights placing fragments of saintly bones or splinters of the true cross inside the lining of their cuirasses, like spiritual padding. Quirky fact for the day. There are records of knights commissioning armor with engraved prayers in Latin, running in tight spirals along the rims of their helmets or the curve of their swords. One breastplate, found in northern Italy, bore the phrase Domine, protegami Lord, protect me? Repeated over a dozen times like a steel rosary, and it wasn't just text. Symbols mattered. Too? Some knights wore images of Saint Michael the Warrior Archangel etched onto their gauntlets or stamped into the tassets at the hip. Others preferred Saint George, the Dragon Slayer, painted onto their shields or shaped into tiny badges pinned to their belts. You touch your own sword hilt? Suddenly remembering the tiny mark near the crossguard, two interlocked circles. You'd always assumed it was decorative. Now you're not so sure. You watch a priest walk down the aisle, sprinkling holy water on the weapons and armor laid before him, blessing the tools of war. A paradox. You think, but one that's been part of the knightly world for centuries. During the Crusades, armor bore religious significance, not just as protection, but as sacrifice. To Chainmail, bearing the cross, was seen as an offering. Some crusaders had crosses sewn into their arming garments. So if they died, and their armor was stripped, the symbol would remain. Others engraved pilgrimage badges into their gorgets, proof they'd walked holy roads. A few even added small pockets to hide token saint medallions. Bonfarmens. Folded prayers. Coins. To pay Charon just in case. And yet, the practice wasn't universal. Some thought it blasphemous to mix sacred and martial things. Others embraced it fully. Historians still debate whether the religious symbols on armor were truly worn out of devotion, or whether they were political, performative, even superstitious. Was it piety or PR? You stare at your gauntlet. It's newer, shiny, unmarked. You wonder if it should have something, a verse, a vow, A name armor feels different when it's marked. Suddenly, the idea of blank steel seems vulnerable. Not physically, spiritually. As if without those tiny prayers, those engraved saints, you're just a man in metal. No guidance, no shield for the soul. You rise, cross yourself, and nod at the priest. He blesses you with a flick of water that dots your cuirass like morning dew. You feel silly. You also feel lighter. Because armor doesn't just stop arrows. Sometimes it stopped doubt. You walk outside into the sunlight. Your cuirass gleams. The cross above your heart is subtle, but you know it's there. You touch it once, almost absent-mindedly. Then draw your sword. You are armored. And maybe, just maybe, you are also blessed. You adjust your gauntlet, tugging at the strap. It's tighter than usual, not from the blacksmith's error, but because your hand is smaller than the last person who wore it. You look around the training yard, crowded with polished helms, sharpened swords, and the thud-thud-thud of boots on packed dirt. And there near the edge is her, hair braided tight, breastplate strapped down. No fanfare, no fluttering standard, just a calm readiness. Because today, you learn the truth behind the myth. Women wore armor too. You step closer. She's already practicing halberds sweeping in arcs, sabatons pounding the earth in rhythm. Her stance is solid, her plate battle-worn. No frills, no hosey emblems, no heart-shaped breastplates, just armor, sized for her, tailored to her movements, designed to do the same job as yours. Keep her breathing. Historians argue over how often women wore armor in combat. Some claim it was rare, reserved for emergencies or symbolic gestures. Others insist it was more common than we think, just poorly documented, scrubbed from the record by scribes who found it inconvenient. You stand here now, watching her move, and decide that arguments in books can wait. This is real. She wears a brigandine's small overlapping plates riveted inside cloth. It hugs the torso closely, flexible and form-fitting, allowing ease of motion without sacrificing protection. Her gauntlets are narrower at the wrist. Her greaves shorter. Her helmet acellet, sleek and rounded, with a tail at the back to guard her neck. Practical, not flashy. And here's your quirky historical tidbit for the night. Joan of Arc's surviving accounts mention a full suit of armor, reportedly costing the equivalent of a noble's year of wages. She wore it into battle, likely mail with plate reinforcement, and rode with a banner. Not a sword, because that was her symbol. But make no mistake, she was armored, and she was feared. But Joan wasn't alone. Across Europe, other names flicker in and out of the records. Nicolosa, the Bolognese woman who wore armor to defend her home in the 14th century. Jeanne Lisney, who led resistance in Beauvais. Catalina de Erauso, a Basque nun who disguised herself as a man, joined the Spanish military, and wore armor during campaigns in the Americas. In Russia, Polish-Lithuanian noblewomen trained alongside men. And in the East, samurai women donned lamellar armor and fought fiercely during clan wars. You remember one story? Maybe legend? Maybe truth of a woman who disguised herself as a man for years, serving in a mercenary company, fighting, winning duels, and only discovered at her funeral. Her comrades never knew, or pretended not to. the armor never cared. Because armor is equalizing. When you're in full plate helmet down, visor closed, your identity vanishes. You become function. A force. Not man. Not woman. Just metal in motion. You watch as she spars with another knight. Their blades clash. And for a moment, the crowd forgets who's who. Just steel. Stance. Skill. When the match ends, both fighters nod. And no one claps. But everyone remembers. And yet, the road to that moment isn't easy. Women in armor faced more than swords. They fought assumptions, taboos, discomfort. Even their armor was harder to obtain. Smiths didn't stock off the rack female cuirasses. Most women wore adjusted male gear or commissioned custom sets, expensive, time-consuming, and often discouraged. You've seen some attempts to feminize armor-ridged busts, narrowed waists, ornamentation more about fashion than function. But she doesn't wear any of that. Hers is plain, serviceable, trusted, because armor isn't meant to flatter. It's meant to fight. She walks past you now, sweat on her brow, helm tucked under one arm. She nods. You nod back. No words. No acknowledgement of difference. Just mutual respect wrapped in rivets. And you realize something history may not have preserved her name. But armor did. Armor remembers everyone who wore it. Every dent. Every patch. Every bloodstain and polish. It carries the weight of those who stepped into it. Not to be seen, but to survive. You look down at your own gauntlet again. It still fits, but you'll never wear it quite the same way again. You're seated by the fire after a long day of marching. The glow reflecting off the dull curve of your breastplate. Across from you, someone's polishing a helmet circular. Oversized. And undeniably strange. Another holds up a pair of greaves with 3 knee spikes. Purely for decoration. A third lifts a curious item, a chainmail thong. You stare. He grins. Joke armor, he says. But it's not always a joke. Sometimes it's belief. Sometimes it's confusion. Because tonight, as stories swirl through the campsite, you begin to sift through the mist of misunderstanding. This is the world of armor, myths, and mistakes, where truth wears a helmet. But fiction's still trying to buckle the chin strap. The first big myth. That knights in full plate armor couldn't get up if they fell. You laugh? You've heard it a dozen times. It's in the plays, the cartoons, the jokes. And yet, you've worn this armor. You've fallen in it? And yes, it's awkward. But you also stood up again. With training and proper balance, you can roll, kneel, rise, and sprint in full plate. It's not a cage. It's a cocoon mobile, balanced, and engineered for action. Why the myth-blamed tournament armor, those ceremonial suits built for jousts? Often heavier and more restrictive. Designed for sitting on a horse and being slammed in the chest with a lance. Try walking in those. And yes, you'll topple like a wind-blown statue. And here's your quirky favorite people. Love to believe that chivalric armor rusted instantly in the rain. As if a single drizzle could turn a knight into a garden sculpture. But real armor was oiled, waxed, and meticulously maintained. Soldiers carried cloths and grease for this reason. Yes, rust was a problem, but instant oxidation, not likely. unless you left your cuirass soaking in a swamp for a month. Another myth: that armor was one size fits all. You sigh. If only. In reality, armor had to be tailored, sometimes painstakingly. A poorly fitted breastplate could restrict breathing. A loose helmet could blind you mid-charge. Many suits were adjusted per season extra padding in winter. Looser straps in summer. Some were even modular, allowing knights to swap parts depending on the fight. And then there's the romantic armor legends. Armor made of gold. Not practical. Too soft. But gilded armor? Yes. Very real. Especially among the rich and insecure. Armor with secret compartments for poison. Extremely rare. Though some suits featured document holders. Small scroll tubes tucked in the backplate, probably for orders. Not assassination. Armor with runic blessings or magical protection symbolically. Yes, literally debatable. But people believed that mattered. Some knights wore iron rings forged during lunar eclipses, or dipped their swords in holy water before battle, hoping for divine reinforcement. Not all armor was tested in fire. Some was tested in faith. You poke at the fire with a mailed hand. Sparks arise. A nearby soldier jokes that your armor could stop a cannonball. You smile? And let's talk about that. By the 16th century, gunpowder was shifting the game. But not instantly. People imagine armor vanished the moment firearms appeared. Not true. Plate armor adapted. Thicker breastplates. Reinforced helmets. More emphasis on deflection. Even when bullets could penetrate. Armor still offered partial protection, slowing projectiles, saving lives. Historians still argue whether armor truly fell out of favor because of guns or because of cost, mobility, and the changing nature of war. What's certain is that armor didn't disappear. It just evolved into buff coats, breastplates, cavalry cuirasses, and eventually, the flak jackets of early modern infantry. One of your companions lifts his shield. It's painted with a lion. For courage, he says. You nod. Not because you believe the lion makes it stronger, but because you understand. Armor isn't always logical. It's cultural, emotional. It reflects what we fear and what we hope. Some wore crosses. Others wore serpents. Some thought mail made from 7 different forges would make them unkillable. One knight insisted on soaking his gambeson in vinegar and ash before every battle. Did it work? Who knows? But that's the thing. Armor is not just metal. It's myth. It's memory. It's misunderstanding wrapped in rivets. You stare into the fire. Your armor warms not by flame, but by story. And in this moment, you wear not just protection. You wear a tradition? It's dawn. And the forge is already alive. Sparks leaping. Hammers ringing. Voices shouting over the hiss of quenching steel. You're not in your armor today. You're in a padded tunic. Sleeves rolled up. Hands blackened with soot. Because today, you step into the realm of the blacksmith, the unseen soul of every suit of armor. Welcome to the world behind the battlefield. The sweat, fire, and rhythm of the armorer's craft. The man beside you is named Osric. His shoulders are the size of barrels, and his beard looks like it could catch embers. He doesn't talk much, but when he picks up his hammer and strikes the red-hot steel, it sings. He's shaping a greave today, a calf plate. Part of a larger commission for a traveling knight who insisted his armor match the curvature of a Venetian goblet. You didn't ask questions. Each piece begins as a sheet of raw steel, usually iron carbon alloy in the later Middle Ages. Osric heats it until it glows, then shapes it over an anvil, a stake, or sometimes a carved wooden form. The shaping process is called raising, where he hammers the metal repeatedly from the edges inward, slowly coiling it into three-dimensional shape. You try it? You last 4 hits before your elbow gives up. Then comes planishing the delicate, almost musical stage where the armor is smoothed, refined, and made beautiful. It's not brute force anymore. It's ballet. Done with small hammers and infinite patience. A breastplate can take days to finish just the front. Your quirky fact of the day. Some master armorers left secret makers' marks inside their pieces' small symbols. Initials, even prayers scratched into the unseen surface. One famous armorer from Milan, Maestro Lucio, allegedly stamped a tiny lizard into the inner curve of every elbow plate he made. Why? Maybe pride. Maybe protection. Maybe whimsy. Osric gestures for you to cool the piece in water. The hiss is satisfying. Steam rises. The steel hardens, but not too much. Too brittle, and it'll shatter. Too soft, and it'll dent. It's a balance. Always a balance. It shows you tempering. Reheating the metal to a specific temperature to adjust hardness. Armor for the arms and legs, slightly softer for flexibility. Chest pieces harden more for survival. Helmets, a combination, rigid crown, softer sides. It's science before science had textbooks. You glance around the workshop. There's more than just steel. Leather straps hang from hooks, waiting to become belt closures, chin straps, hinge wraps. Piles of rivets glint in bowls. A half-assembled gauntlet lies in the corner. Its finger lames spread like a skeletal hand, reaching for completion. You help assemble it? Fumbling with the tiny pins that hold each plate together. It takes an hour just to attach 4 fingers. You now understand why knights prized a good pair of gauntlets. They were miracles of engineering, and absolute devils to maintain. Some of the boys in the back are working on decorative etching a commission from a noblewoman who wants her family's crest on her spaulders. They heat the surface, then use acid etching to carve delicate patterns into the steel. The smell is sharp. The detail, stunning. Even war has its aesthetics. Historians still argue about how standardized medieval armor production really was. Were workshops like this part of a massive military supply chain, or did each knight commission his own suit? Piece by agonizing piece. The answer, both. Cities like Milan, Augsburg, and Innsbruck were known for white armor unpainted. Mirror-finished plate shipped across Europe, but local smiths filled gaps, made adjustments, added personal touches. Armor was never truly mass-produced. It was always personal. Osric hands you a completed vambrace. You hold it in your hands. It's heavy, but balanced. Smooth, but solid. You run your thumb along the edge? Not sharp. It's been filed down to prevent catching or cutting, especially useful in tight formations. Little details you never thought about. But someone else did. You help attach the leather lining. You oil the metal. You test the articulation, and then, when it's done, Osric says nothing. He just nods. It's perfect. And it's a reminder every suit of armor has a maker. Someone bent over the forge, dreaming of protection. Someone who never wore it into battle, but knew what it meant to survive. You leave the forge, hands aching, clothes stained, mind full. Next time you buckle on your cuirass, you'll remember the heat that shaped it, the calloused hands that riveted your gauntlets, the prayer, scratched quietly inside your helm, that no one will ever see. Because armor doesn't just protect your life, it carries it. You're standing in front of a wall stone, mossy and impossibly high. Behind it, the enemy. Ahead of it, your future. And strapped to your chest is a breastplate that suddenly feels much too thin. Welcome to siege warfare, where armor isn't just your last line of defense, it's your passport to hell. The air hums with tension. You hear the groan of ropes tightening, the thunder of a trebuchet arm snapping downward, and the distant shriek of a rock hurtling through the sky. It crashes somewhere behind you, splintering earth and timber. You flinch? Everyone does. Sieges are different. They're not about honor or banners fluttering gallantly in the wind. They're about surviving a very long time in a very small space. And armor, once made for galloping charges and glorious duels, is now being forced to endure siege physics, falling masonry, boiling oil, collapsing ladders, and things flung by gravity that were never meant to fly. You glance down at your kit. You're wearing siege harness, an adjusted version of your standard armor. Thicker plates over the chest and back, extra padding on your helm, narrow eye slits, more coverage over your thighs and arms. Even your gauntlets are reinforced with knuckle bars, because stones don't care about chivalry. Some knights even wear reinforced spaulders and bever plates strapped with overlapping mail beneath. The goal isn't elegance, it's impact resistance. Siege warfare doesn't stab, it smashes. Quirky fact: for today, some siege-specific armor had integrated padding quilted wool stitched directly under metal plates to reduce concussion from falling debris. It made the armor bulkier. But after your friend gets knocked unconscious by a door hinge flung from a mangonel, you start appreciating the added bounce. You look up. The walls mock you. Arrow slits glint in the morning light. And then the defenders open fire crossbows, longbows, even slings. You hear the telltale buzz of arrows skipping off helmets. One lodges in your comrade's tasset and sticks like an angry toothpick. He grunts, doesn't stop moving. You raise your tower shield, an enormous slab of wood and steel almost as tall as you. It's not elegant, it's not mobile, but it's keeping you alive as you push forward. Behind you, other soldiers haul Pavis's portable shields with notches for archers to shoot through. Protection is mobile now, layered, tactical. You glance to the side and spot a man in full plate, hunkered down with a pickaxe. Not to fight, to dig. Siege armor isn't just for combat, it's for engineering. Tunneling, sapping, climbing. You once spent 8 hours belly crawling in the mud, breastplate grinding against rock, hoping the tunnel wouldn't collapse before the wall did. And when it's time to assault the walls, you climb a ladder in armor. One hand holding a sword, the other gripping rungs, slick with rain and blood. At the top, a defender with a polearm waiting to knock you into your ancestors. So you wear gorgets, reinforced pauldrons, and pray your helmet doesn't twist when you're struck. Historians still argue how effective full armor was in sieges. Some say It saved countless lives. Others say it turned men into drowning turtles when they fell into the moat. The truth, both. You've seen a man sink under the weight of his own plate. You've also seen one walk away from a stone strike that would have turned an unarmored skull into porridge. You pause to breathe, crouched behind a mantlet, one of the many portable wooden walls pushed forward during an advance. Smoke curls from burning oil thrown down from the parapets. You adjust your visor. It's starting to fog, but you won't lift it. Not here. Not now. You hear the battering ram behind you? Start up again, thud. 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 The gate shudders with each strike. Soon, the breach? Then, it'll be hand to hand. Inside the walls. Close quarters. Stabbing. Not swinging. And armor will shift again from resistance to survival. You'll switch to a short sword or mace, wielded low and tight. Your armor won't just protect your body, it will define how you fight. There's a camaraderie among the armored now. You nod at another knight, face unreadable under his houndskull helm. You don't know his name? Doesn't matter. He lifts his shield. You lift yours. And together, you move? Because in a siege, armor isn't just about what you wear. It's about who you stand with, how you advance, how you endure. One strike at a time. Night fights. The battle pauses not out of mercy, but exhaustion. You sit near a brazier. Armor still on. Too sore to remove it. Too wary to sleep without it. Across from you, a man begins to remove his gear piece by piece. Shoulders. Vambraces. Gauntlets. He winces with every motion. Beneath the steel-purple bruises, old scars, and bandages wrapped with more hope than skill. Welcome to the aftermath, where armor meets the most unforgiving opponent of all reality. Because armor, for all its glory, leaves a mark. You stretch, but only slightly. The plates tug against your joints. Your gambeson is soaked sweat. Mud. A little blood. Possibly yours. You smell like the inside of a smithy's apron after a rainstorm. You know you should remove it, but then you'd have to clean it, and relace it, and sleep exposed. So instead, you sit, letting the weight remind you that you're still here. Let's talk damage. A sword didn't pierce your breastplate today, but the blunt trauma from that poleaxe, you'll feel that for a week. The armor stopped the blade. It didn't stop the shock. Your ribs might still be intact, but they're contemplating early retirement. You've learned to tell which bruises are mildly inconvenient and which ones might make coughing an adventure. Here's your quirky truth for the night. Medieval fighters often carried poultices and herbal salves designed specifically for under-armor bruising. Recipes varied: honey, vinegar, crushed herbs, wine, not because they were miraculous, but because anything cold and sticky helped. And yes, sometimes armor was removed with help from a companion wielding tongs or bone hooks. You do not want to be that guy. You glance at your helmet, still dented from earlier. It saved your life. But now, the visor sticks. The hinge is warped. You'll need to find a smith before next March. And that's the rub. Armor doesn't heal like you do. It has to be fixed, reforged, maintained. You just have to breathe through the pain. You watch another knight struggling to remove his cuirass. Two squires are prying it open like a clam. Beneath, his gambeson is black with blood. but he's alive. That's the armor's silent promise. I won't stop the pain, but I'll give you a chance to feel it. Armor leaves you sore in ways you didn't expect. Your neck, from holding up the helmet. Your hips, from the weight of the tassets. Your hands, from gripping weapons through articulated gauntlets. You've developed calluses in places people don't talk about. You're not broken, but you're bent. In body and spirit, and still, you choose to wear it. Historians often focus on the design, the metallurgy, the elegance. But they sometimes forget what you know in your bones armor is exhausting. It's loud. It's hot. It isolates you. In a crowd, you can't hear your own thoughts. You can't eat without help. You can barely relieve yourself without elaborate rituals. It's a prison of protection, a blessing with buckles. But there's comfort. 2. You've grown used to it. You feel naked without it. The breastplate becomes your second chest. The greaves, your second skin. When you hear armor creaking, it's like a heartbeat. And in the stillness of night, when everything else fades, the sound of your own gear shifting is oddly soothing. You remember your first time putting on plate? The excitement, the weight, the sense that you had become someone stronger, bolder, invulnerable. That illusion didn't last long. The first battle stripped it away. But in its place grew something better: truth. That armor won't save you, but it will walk beside you. Through battle, through silence, through recovery. You lean back, eyes closing. You still wear your breastplate. You still feel the ache of every strap, the pressure at your ribs, the tightness in your spine. You'll remove it in the morning. For now, you rest as you are wrapped in steel and stillness, because survival isn't glamorous, but it is earned. Dawn breaks, not with birdsong, but with the low murmur of camp noise squires bustling, hooves clopping, armor creaking as warriors rise from uneasy sleep. You stretch and feel it again, that dull ache beneath your breastplate. But today is different. There's no battle, no Ziga, no enemy in sight. Today, you walk among the living dressed in steel, not for war, but for parade. Welcome to the armor of pageantry, where steel becomes ceremony. You polish your gauntlets until they shine like mirrors. Not for protection. There's no need. This is armor as symbol. Armor as identity. Armor as a language only. Nobles truly speak. You pass the open field where others are assembling. Trumpets sound. Banners. Unfurl. And suddenly, the dirt and smoke of battle feel far away. This is armor's other life. The one where it performs. You're not just a knight today. You're a figure of awe. Your cuirass is blued, not painted, but heat-treated until it turned deep indigo. The fluting on your pauldrons is excessive, theatrical, almost floral. Your tassets are embossed with the image of lions. Your gorget is gilded, and your helm, not your battlefield armet. Today, you wear a visored close helm with a golden sunburst crest jutting upward like a royal flame. It's absurd. It's beautiful. It's the Renaissance equivalent of walking around in a luxury car while fireworks go off behind you. You mount your horse. Even he wears his best bright caparison. Polished chanfron. Silver edging on the petrol. You catch a glimpse of your reflection in a basin. You look ridiculous. You look magnificent. And here's your quirky note of the day. By the 16th century, many wealthy nobles commissioned 2 suits of armor, one for war and one for parade. Parade armor was often heavier, more embellished, and sometimes not combat-worthy at all. Some even had articulated wings, élaborate plumes, or ridiculous mythological motifs, sea monsters, phoenixes, even entire hunting scenes etched into the backplates. This was a time when kings and dukes held mock battles called tournaments of peace, where armor was designed to catch the eye. Not just the lance. The pageant helm became a piece of sculpture, sometimes weighing more than 10 kilograms, covered in feathers, velvet, pearls. One famous German suit had a grotesque visor shaped like a snarling satyr part. Intimidation, part performance, art. Historians still argue whether parade armor served any real purpose outside vanity. Some say it was wasted wealth. Others argue it reinforced political image, demonstrating power, prosperity, and control. When Charles V paraded in his gold-trimmed harness, it wasn't just for show. It told a story: I am untouchable. I am divine. I am prepared. Even in peace. You ride slowly through town. The crowd parting. Children pointing. Merchants bowing. Your armor gleams in the morning light. For once, it's not covered in mud or ash or blood. It reflects faces. Clouds. Hope. A trumpet sounds again. The tilt yard opens. Nobles ride out in pairs. Lances lowered not to kill, but to display. The tilt bar separates them. Sparks fly as wood meets wood. One unhorses the other with an elegant arc of motion, and the crowd erupts. And you simply watch. Because sometimes, armor is about presence, not action. You feel different in this armor. Taller. More composed. Less like a survivor. More like a statue come to life. No one knows about your bruises under the tassets. Your fraying gambeson. Your cracked ribs still healing beneath the polished plate. They don't see that. They see you. Shining. But armor knows. It remembers both lives, the one of war and the one of ritual. It carries blood and ceremony in equal measure. You dismount, remove your helmet, and the people cheer, not for what you've done, but for what you represent. Steel. Strength. A spectacle. And in a world always flirting with chaos, even the illusion of protection is worth celebrating. You stand in the gallery of a grand hall. Stone walls, silent as tombs. The air thick with reverence and dust. Before you are figures, not men, not alive, but armor. Posed as if in mid-step, frozen in time. Some stand erect, weapons raised. Others kneel. One clutches a lance, visor down, as if moments from charge. This is no battlefield. This is a museum. You walk slowly among them. The clang of your own sabatons on the marble floor echoes, eerily out of place among so many voiceless warriors. They're displayed behind ropes and glass, but their presence is undeniable. You're surrounded by ghosts in steel. Each suit here is different. Italian elegance, German Gothic, English tournament, etched, gilded, thin-scarred. Some are pristine parade armor never worn in battle. Others bear the marks of service scratches. Repères? Mismatched rivets. You study them like old friends. And that's when you realize something profound armor doesn't die. It survives. Passed down. Repurposed. Preserved. Even performed, because these husks are more than historical exhibits. They're records. Every plate, every strap, every curve carries a story. And you're reading them like scripture. One breastplate has a small hole. Perfectly round. Gunshot. Probably fatal. Another shows acid etching of vines and Latin phrases. A third is painted. Yes, painted with the coat of arms of a knight who died centuries ago. You wonder who wore this. What did they fear? What did they hope for? Here's your quirky discovery for today. Armor in museums is often composite. That is, not all pieces belong to the same person. Curators, faced with incomplete suits, sometimes combine pieces from different sets, different centuries, even different regions, to build a complete figure. It's practical, it's beautiful, and it's not always honest, but it is real. Because armor, like memory, is rarely whole. You pause at one figure, displayed in a striking pose, one hand on the hilt of a sword, the other raised. A visor shaped like a snarling beast. A breastplate so polished it reflects your face. And in that warped reflection, you see your own armor, modern, functional, less beautiful, but connected. These aren't relics. They're relatives. You recall something a master armorer once said, "Steel remembers better than paper." He wasn't wrong. While scrolls fade and books burn, armor remains. You could bury it for 100 years and still find the shape of a man within it. Some visitors nearby giggle at one suit's extravagant plumes. Others gape at the sheer size of a tournament helm. A child asks, "Was this for a real knight?" And the guide stooped. Smiling says, "Yes and no. This armor was for all of them." And you get it. Because armor, once worn, never truly loses its purpose. Even static, it commands, even silent. It speaks, and in this room of statues, you feel less like a visitor and more like a continuation. Historians still argue whether museums sanitize war, whether armor loses meaning behind glass. But as you stand here, breathing in the weight of centuries, you think, no, the meaning's still here. You just have to listen differently. You touch your chest, where your own cuirass lies beneath your tabard. Yours is newer, simpler, but it echoes theirs. You walk on, past a gauntlet the size of a dinner plate, past a child's breastplate, made for a 10-year-old page, past a suit so covered in religious iconography it looks more altar than armor. And you feel it quiet awe, not just for the craftsmanship, but for what this all meant. Protection, prestige, power, identity, hope. You reach the exit and glance back one last time. 100 empty suits stare silently forward. But they're not empty. They're waiting. Not for battle, but to be remembered. The wind is sharp today, biting. Dry. Full of distant drum beats. You stand on a rocky bluff. Your armor catching the last light of the sun. Below, the remnants of a battlefield stretched like a ruined tapestry. Broken spears. Abandoned shields. dented helms. No bodies. They've been taken, buried, or burned. But the armor remains. Forgotten pieces glint among the dust. This is the armor that didn't make it into museums or memory. This is abandoned armor, the silent aftermath of war. You descend slowly, each step stirring ash and gravel. Near a twisted tree, you find a helmet split down one side. Its visor sheared away. You pick it up. It's heavier than expected, caked with dirt, warped by heat. The inside still smells faintly of sweat. And something older. You realize you're holding a kind of grave marker. Armor wasn't always recovered. In the chaos after battle, when victors chased fleeing enemies or buried their own, many suits were left where they fell, too damaged to reuse, too common to reclaim, too painful to face. They rusted, sank into the earth, became part of the land. You kneel near what used to be a breastplate. The front is caved in, the back is missing. It's surrounded by shards of mail, tiny rings that once protected a side, a neck, a heart. You imagine the blow that did this? A hammer, a lance, a fall from a horse onto a pike. There's no name here. No monument. Just impact. Your quirky fact for this dusk: archaeologists excavating historic battlefields Agincourt, Visby, Towton have uncovered crushed, fragmented, melted pieces of armor, sometimes fused with bone. At Visby, in Sweden, many skeletons were found still partially armored, some with padded jacks hardened by blood. It's rare, but when it happens, it tells a full story, one of sudden death, hurried burial, and unspoken loss. You move slowly now, listening to the breeze through tall grass. Here lies a gauntlet, fingers curled as if still holding a blade. There, the curved edge of a shield boss, torn from its wooden frame. You find a horse's chanfron, nose agat, bent inward, as if the animal had collapsed mid-gallop. You wonder if anyone mourned these warriors, if their family searched for them, if their armor was ever expected to return. Historians still debate how often armor was looted or reused. In theory, it was valuable melted down, sold, refitted. But in practice, not every battlefield allowed for cleanup. Disease, weather, threat of ambush. Sometimes, the risk outweighed the reward. And so, armor stayed, becoming memorial by default. You remember a story once told by an old soldier that at night, on old fields, you can hear armor rattling, as if its former wearer still paces in search of something. A helmet, a sword, an ending. You don't believe in ghosts, but you believe in resonance. You run your fingers over a gorget's edge. The steel is rough, broken, but still steel. Still shaped to fit a throat. Still part of someone's final defense. And you realize, even ruined, armor holds dignity. Not all armor ends in museums. Not all armor survives battle. But every piece battered, lost, abandoned still says, I stood between life and death. Even in silence. Even in ruin. It remembers. You gather a few fragments. Not to take, just to straighten. You lay the helmet upright, place the breastplate nearby. Nothing ceremonial. Just respect. You rise. The sun dips behind the horizon. The field fades to shadow. And still, the armor glows faintly, catching the last golden light like a whisper. You walk away, your own plates clinking in rhythm. And for the first time in hours, you feel the weight on your shoulders not as burden, but as continuity. Because one day, your armor might be left behind too. But tonight, it's still moving. You return to your tent beneath a sky full of stars. Your armor set aside at last. It leans quietly against the wooden post chest plate, reflecting the fire's glow. Gauntlets resting like folded hands. Helmet, watching with that still, expressionless gaze. Tonight, no more clashing steel. No more weight tugging at your shoulders. Just breath. Just silence. You lie down slowly. Every muscle aware of its service. The absence of armor feels strange now. You're so used to its presence, to the way it shapes you both, literally and symbolically. Without it, you feel exposed, lighter, and maybe a little lost. Because armor is never just armor. It's the forge, the battlefield, the prayer, the parade. It's every bruise you took, every moment you stood taller than you felt. It's every name etched into the margins of history, some remembered, many not. It's sweat-stained gambesons and gilded sallets. It's Gothic fluting and ragtag leather scraps sewn with kitchen knives. It's the sound of your breath echoing inside a helm. The press of the cuirass against your ribs as you charge. The dull ache in your knees after a day in greaves. It's a squire's nervous hands. Fumbling straps. It's a commander's nod. A blessing muttered beneath your gorget. A dent that saved your life. A crack that didn't. And now, in the hush of midnight, it is rest. You think of the suits still displayed in castles and cathedrals? The ones half buried in fields. The ones reborn in stories and paintings. They all once belonged to someone like you. Someone who stood, fell, fought, and endured. Not because they were made of iron, but because they wore it anyway. You close your eyes. You feel the air on your skin. Cool and free. But you carry the armor still not on your back, but in your bones, and tomorrow you'll put it back on. Not because you must, but because you can.